We are going to begin with public comment. I'm going to ask that if you have a public comment that is specific to the issues of reopening schools at the middle school and high school, that you hold that comment until that item on the agenda. We will at that point listen to everybody's public comments on that topic. I just want to make sure tonight is also our budget hearing, and so I just want to ensure that we have ample coverage of the budget and it doesn't end up being sort of a late night addition to the meeting. So at this time, I'm going to ask if you have community comment. Community comments are an opportunity for members of this community to be heard. We respectfully request that you make your comments brief and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. Please try to avoid repeating points that have already been made. For community comments, please virtually raise your hand and wait to be called on. When you speak, please begin by stating your name and whether you live in Dover, Sherburne, Boston, or a member of our faculty. Community comments are an opportunity for the school committee to listen to members of the community, but not a forum for answering questions or engaging in debate. Once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we move on to our other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will not be permitted. Now, again, just to repeat for those folks who might have just joined us, if you can just please mute yourself so that you don't accidentally become the star of the show. And also, if you have a community comment that is not specifically about reopening, we'd like to hear it now. We will be opening up community comments again, before that topic comes up on the agenda, so that people who need to be heard will have ample time to do so. So just community comments not related to reopening. Anyone? And Judy, if you can just help me look. I'm looking for the hands raised signal, but sometimes people can't find that. So if you make your, turn your screen on and raise your hand, we'll try and find you as well. But I think that we don't have community comments other than reopening. So with that, we will return to the community comment section later tonight. And then I'm just switching back and forth between a lot of windows trying to stay green. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. Does somebody have it in front of them? Because it just closed my window.
Yeah, the next item is the reports. It says superintendent update, assistant superintendent update,
okay.
and then
so yep. So we're going to listen to reports. We're going to save the part of the superintendent update that's germane to school reopening, right, Andrew?
Yes, but I did have one announcement that I was hoping to make.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Good, perfect. So this past school year has been a challenging one, and everybody knows that. Been a tough time to be a school leader, whether you're a building leader or a district leader. It's been a super challenging time. And to that end, we've been very fortunate in that Anna Hurley has stepped up as our assistant principal for the year at the middle school. And I wanted to announce that, having spent a lot of time speaking with Scott Kellett about this, the current principal, I'd like to name Anna our permanent assistant principal moving forward. Obviously, that would become effective July 1st because that's when our contracts go into effect, but we would certainly write something up and she would become our assistant principal effective July 1st. I can tell you that Anna has served our district exceptionally well for 16 years. Most people know that. I know my children, or some of my children, certainly had her. She's been one of those people who has served as a balance for the system during these difficult months this year. And she's thoughtful, she's progressive, she's not afraid to try new things. She has great relationships with our kids. She works very well with our staff and with our families. These are really tough traits to find in just one person. So with that, I'd like to thank Anna for her service this year and congratulate her on her fine job, and look forward to seeing much more success from Anna in the future. And I know Scott is here. I don't know if Scott wanted to weigh in.
I'd be glad to. I think we're very fortunate that she has decided to stay on as the assistant principal. I do question her sanity, given the year we've been through, but she has been fantastic. And I don't know where I would be without her handing me my cane every now and then, because I am getting old. She's really done well, and she will do even better. So congratulations, Anna.
Thank you so much, Scott. That's really great news. We've also, members of the committee, I don't want to speak for everyone, but watched, along the side at, a really tough lift this year for the community, and what I think, all of us, again, completely unexpected situations, and has really been able to lead with grace and collaboration and a positive attitude in all situations, which I find pretty inspirational personally. So terrific choice. I don't know if any other members have something to say about that.
Thanks everyone.
Yes, I see some thumbs up, and even among the audience while you were talking, Andrew, there were various thumbs up and clapping emojis happening. And so I think that's a real welcome decision. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. McCoy?
Hi, good evening. So I am here to just give an update on DS Aid. If it's okay, I'll share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? Excellent. And I'm going to be calling on some help from my friends in the audience, so stay tuned. But Dover-Sherborn Aid is our coalition for anti-racism, inclusion, diversity, and equity. In the system, we've been meeting regularly since October, both as a steering committee with leaders from each of the subgroups, and then the subgroups have also been meeting on their own. As a reminder, the mission of this group is to foster a school community free from bias and discrimination and ensure a sense of belonging and equitable outcome for all Dover-Sherborn students. So I'm just going to give a brief update from each of the 6 subcommittees. Data and accountability, which is being led by Gina Cooper and Barb Brown. They have done a tremendous amount of research and collaboration with the other groups to develop a request for proposals relative to our equity audit. In doing that, they have asked those interested in doing the audit to look at policies and procedures, curriculum and materials, standardized testing, the diversity of our staff, student data, the interventions that we provide to our students, the ability of our leadership team to drive DEI work. So definitely a very comprehensive audit we have before us. And moving forward, they are reviewing the proposals that come in and will absolutely assist throughout the audit as our consultants ask for information and need help organizing focus groups. Curriculum and competencies. I have the pleasure of working with Caleb Dolan and a number of our educators on this committee. At our last meeting, we unpacked Bank's levels of curriculum transformation and started to preview a number of the tools that we'll be using with our faculty next year as we do an equity audit of our curriculum. Just to give you a sense of what that looks like, there's 4 levels of curriculum transformation. Level 1 is very familiar to us. Those are celebration for MLK Day or Cinco de Mayo, things that are one-off from the curriculum, which of course is not the ideal situation. Level 2 is the additive scenario, where perhaps we're starting to add books to our libraries to make sure that there is more than one perspective integrated throughout our resources. Level 3 transformation is when we start to do things like our high school English department, where they use the absolute diary of a part-time Indian to talk about microaggressions, or when in our technology and engineering department, they are looking at bias and coding. And then level 4 is the ultimate goal, social action. And examples would include the 5th grade Citizens in Action program, where each child adopts a cause and does some research and some marketing and helps move the agenda forward, as well as our social media class that has been looking at how activist groups and social justice groups have been using social media and then providing and creating their own platforms for this type of work. Hiring and supporting educators. I did not find him for this, but I know Mr. Smith is on this call and he's been working with Dr. Reineman and a number of teachers. John, would you like to say anything about your work?
Yes, certainly. So we've had the opportunity to look at the interview questions that we offer across all of our schools. We are working on creating a unified bank of questions that would directly address issues of anti-racism, inclusion, diversity, and equity. In addition, we are also looking at alternative advertising sites in addition to School Spring to create a greater pool of candidates of color for our potential openings over the next few years. We are also looking at professional development that will continue to take place. And we're also looking to engage in partnerships that allow us to attend diversity job fairs in the greater Boston area.
Great, thank you very much. Community outreach. This is led by Mila Clark, but in conjunction with Kate Potter and Monique Marshall-Veal. Kate, do you mind giving us an update on community outreach?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, so I think one of the really interesting things about all of these subcommittees is that a lot of them overlap in interesting ways. So some work that Monique and Mila and I have been doing from a Metco lens has lent itself really nicely into the community outreach. So one thing—
Yeah, I'll be up in a minute.
One thing we're in the process of doing is securing some different exciting work with the author Jennifer DeLeon, who wrote Don't Ask Me Where I'm From, which is a young adult book about a Metco student, a fictional Metco student in a fictional town that's an awful lot like Dover-Sherborn. And we're talking with her about coming in to do a creative writing class, some potential professional development, as well as a community-wide book conversation with her. And we're also linking in the Dover and Sherburne libraries have been discussing doing a community book talk with a different author, and different churches from Dover-Sherburne and the surrounding communities are working on their own different DEI outreach. And so, well, I see in your last bullet point, trying to bring all those things together and making sure folks know what's out there and going on.
Great, thank you. And while you're here, your official group, Climate and Culture.
Climate and Culture, right. So it was interesting just rereading your bank's curriculum levels that you referred to. On our last subcommittee call, we were really talking about how do we build things into the culture of Dover-Sherburne versus just having one-off events. So we're really trying to look deeply at things like getting information from students on how their students of all of our students on how they feel about the climate at DS, how can we do better, exploring opportunities for training for students and staff and providing times for difficult conversations, and considering expanding our mentor programs. Those are just a few of the things we're working on. It's a big list, but.
Great, thank you very much. Certainly a lot of work going into that committee. And policies and procedures, Lynn Collins, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, so policies and procedures, we're a team of 6, and we've sort of started the process of dividing up the policies into certain, either geographic or expertise based categories. And our main goal right now is to just sort of collect as many of the policies and procedures as we're aware of, and then identify any issues either in their terms or in their application that could raise equity issues, and then be in a position to provide that information and to provide assistance to the equity audit. because this, I've said it in the past, this is complex work that we would really benefit from the expertise of others to pursue. We should not be reinventing the wheel on this. These are issues that have been dealt with by other districts and, other communities. And so we want to be able to take full advantage of the learnings from those areas to be able to address our own policies internally. And obviously we also want to do everything as data driven as possible. So right now we're in the process of collecting information, and hopefully with the equity audit, we'll be able to, get our boots on the ground and get working. We've also updated the harassment policies as is indicated on the screen. And so those are in the process of going through the school committees for approval. And I guess those are the big ticket items for policies and procedures.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, each of the subcommittees is spending a tremendous amount of time doing a lot of important work, and this will obviously continue for the next several years. But just looking back at the last year, we've made tremendous progress, and I'm so proud of the work that we're doing. That being said, in order to share our work with the rest of the community, our DS website is officially being launched, and there are several pages to it. We're showing district data, several resources and tools for people to go, and wherever they are in the learning process around DEI work and DEI initiatives, they can find resources there to continue on along the process. Several books for children, for our young readers, for adults that we can use in our classrooms and beyond. There's a section for educators about curriculum and pedagogy and assessment, the programs that are in our schools, student organizations, some of the organizations that are working with our students, professional development opportunities are there, practices, so that speaks to our policies, and as Lynn was talking about, our anti-discrimination and anti-bullying work, that information can be found there. Support, how we support both our students and our colleagues in having difficult conversations, as well as facing some of the tragic events that have been happening in our world. And of course, the page on hiring to support the work that Mr. Smith was discussing in terms of diversifying our faculty and making sure that all of our teachers and educators are prepared to support our students in this work. And I will end there just saying that it's our goal to educate students so that they can question their education and question the world around them, so they can be smart consumers of information, social activists to make the world a better place. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions, and I will surely share the slide deck and the website with all of you afterwards.
Thank you. And Mrs. McCoy, I think it's not that often that we have so much of a good audience for our meetings. And I think that it's really great that we have had the opportunity to get this update tonight with so many folks, tuning in. This is really, really important work. And it is not lost on me that you and the greater committee has been able to take this work on and do meaningful things with it in a year where it's really hard to think of anything that doesn't start with the letter C. So I really appreciate the work of all the members of the committee and all the folks who are doing work, behind the scenes to make up the work that the committee is doing, and for the courage that it takes to ask these hard questions. So I don't know what the other things my colleagues would like to add or questions that they might have. All right. We very much applaud this work. We, as you may know, the school committees, the 3 school committees will be engaging with one of your members. Ms. Latour has offered and is going to facilitate a workshop for us at the end of March on an evening where we're going to have a professional development retreat on the tenets of anti-racism and the things that we need to know as you know, your elected officials for community members, we think that it's really important that we're learning alongside the educators, and that we're willing to really open ourselves up to new understandings. And so thank you for you know, just being part of the catalyst to bring that opportunity to the school committee. And you know, we'll enjoy that night and hopefully become smarter for it as well.
Maggie, can I add one quick thing?
Absolutely.
Just for perspective on all of this, you remember that not long ago, we were in the midst as a country of real turmoil about these senseless killings of people. But what it did was it forced us to look in the mirror, and we heard immediately from former students about their learning experiences at Dover-Sherborn, and we collectively, the joint school committees and the administration, felt like this was something that was just too important to let slide. And all the people that are here tonight from the DSA and all the people who are not here tonight, I hope they know how important a step they have forced us to take. Look at the important work that's happening. And this is a result of us collectively getting around something and saying, this, we can do better. So I just want to pass along my appreciation as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Keough. And yeah, it's about our whole community, right? It's not just about schools. And you know, I appreciate very much the part in the slide where we are working to connect with our other community organizations, churches, and other groups, you know, other religious organizations and civic groups to do this work together, because I think it really, you know, and it's not going to be done, right? Like, it's never going to be like something that we can say DS8 was a thing and now it's over and it's something that we can check the box. It's just work we're going to have to keep coming back to, because it's just the hard things. And I don't know, I think that it's really the fundamental thing of what education is. That last slide was really a gem. Thank you. Moving on to our warrant report. Dawn, anything we specifically need to know besides what's in the report?
No, it's just your monthly report to show you what warrants have been signed since your last meeting.
Fantastic. Okay. We are now going to open our budget discussion. Do we need to do anything in terms of opening another meeting, or it's because it's just a region, we're just having the budget discussion and hearing, Dawn, right?
Yeah, no, technically it's a separate meeting, but you don't need to be formal about it.
Okay.
It's
So
because you're allowing to, there will be an opportunity for any community comments on the budget, because this is the open hearing for the budget. Then you'll close the budget hearing and do your votes.
fantastic. Okay. So if there is anyone here tonight who would like to make community comments as it pertains to the budget, this would be your time now to raise your hand.
After the budget presentation, sorry.
After the presentation.
Yes.
So sorry. All right. I'm going to put that in a different order.
Yeah.
We're going to begin the hearing on our budget. As we're getting started, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dawn, who will run that portion of the meeting. And before I do, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the folks here in the district, all of our administrators and people who work together to put this budget together, as well as to all of the constituents and the various members of different boards and bodies of Dover and Sherburne who weigh in on this along the way. It truly is a group effort, and I'm really excited about the budget that we're about to present tonight. Dawn.
Perfect. Thank you, Maggie. So this is the fiscal year 22 budget for Dover-Sherborn Regional Schools. So hopefully we'll give you enough information that you feel you're educated about the budget. And again, I'm excited too about how many people we get to share this information with this evening. So we build the budget using certain assumptions. And so this is not normally an assumption that we have, but given that we're coming off a COVID year, we are assuming for fiscal year 22 to have regular school operations, which incorporates in-person 5 days a week. And at the region, we are looking at level enrollment, which is approximately 1,200 students. We built the budget in compliance with the guidance given to us by our 2 town members. So for Dover's guidance is that we should have a level service budget with reduced expenditures where possible. So that means they allow us to keep up with the cost of. Sorry about that. keep up of the cost of what's happening, and they'll incorporate that. And then where there's places we can try to reduce, we are asked to do that. Sherburne, on the other hand, uses what we're called level funded. So they want us to have the same budget that we had this year, but they do allocate a 2% increase in any of our salary expenses. So those are two different variables that we sort of continue to work with as we build our budget at the region. We continue to have alignment with the district's strategic plan. Obviously, everything that we do wants to be focused on an end goal. And so you'll see a couple places where we have continued to pull in some of the goals into the budget. And again, coming off the year of COVID and where we've been, we have acute awareness of potential post-COVID-19 state budget financial constraints that we've all been listening to on the nightly news. Okay, it's frozen. There we go. So what are the budget drivers that are impacting our budget this year? Obviously, payroll and related benefits is almost 85% of our budget, 80% of our budget. And what's driving that this year is our contractual agreements. Most of our employees are in a contractual agreement with set increases, and these usually last 3-year periods. So for fiscal year 22, we're looking at approximately 2% across most of our bargaining units. Again, with our educators having step and lane increases, which range from 4 to 13%. We are not looking to add any new staffing positions for fiscal year 22, so we're maintaining the same staffing levels. And as we do in some years, we are realizing some salary savings from not only retirements, but also some staffing changes, and those are incorporated into the budget. The good news that we had last week was our healthcare increases that those rates were approved last week, and with a little bit of reserves being used by our purchasing group that we work with, our rates are looking coming in about 3.4%. Just to give you some perspective, last year those same rates were 8%. So that's definitely helping our budget this year. And we're pleased to continue to say that approximately 45% of our participants are enrolled in a high deductible healthcare plan, which has both savings for us as the employer, but also the employee in premiums, and allows them actually a tax deferred tax savings account. So that's been a great thing that we added 3 years ago. We're continuing to fund our OPEB liability trust. Last year was the first year we contributed to the fund, and we will continue to contribute to that on an annual basis. And by doing that, we're reducing our outstanding liability for post-retirement benefits. And just to give you an idea, that's for our retirees for their healthcare cost. The other retirement item that drives our budget is our Norfolk County retirement annual assessment. The great news that we also received this year was that every 2 years they do a reevaluation, and based on that reevaluation, our assessment for the region actually went down 40%. Typically, we see a 10% increase. So that was about a $115,000 swing in our budget. So that was a nice piece of information that we received last week also. We continue to trend budget, and what we mean by that is when we see our accounts, our individual budget line items that we're not fully utilizing every year, we trim them back so that we are trying to spend to where our actuals are. And we also continue to spend smarter and where we can make different choices that are cost savings for the region. For the towns, for their assessments, that is actually the biggest the driver for that is student enrollment. And we do see fluctuations from year to year based on how many students attending the region from Sherburne and how many attending the region from Dover. This particular year, Sherburne is seeing a little bit of an increase based on the number of students attending, as a 0.63% increase for the operating assessment and 0.65% increase for the capital assessment. Another way to look at that is about every 1% swing and the student enrollment assessment percentage equates to about $200,000 in assessments for the towns based on our budget. So where does that lead us? That leaves us with an overall operating budget increase of $226,751, which at a 0.87% is actually an unbelievable budget. We typically, you can see in fiscal year 21, it was at 3.4%. We range anywhere, somewhere in the 3% range is usually where we land. So this is an exceptionally good year for budget purposes. Based on that, and based on what I mentioned about the student enrollment and how that affects the assessment, the town of Dover has actually seen a decrease in their assessment over fiscal year 21, and Sherburne has seen a slight increase. And again, when you realize that they're picking up 0.65%, that's where that is playing out. So when you look at the different components of what funds the region, as you can see, the money we receive from the towns is about 87%. So they definitely are the primary contributory to our budget. You want next see our state aid, which is about 11. And that's in a way that is actually helpful for us because other
school reopening.
Other towns and districts actually rely much more heavily on the state. So budget impacts at the state level have a bigger impact for them. So we are somewhat protected by that, which has been helpful for us. And then you see there's some other fees that we collect: athletics, parking. You'll notice an increase in high school activity fees as part of our strategic plan and looking at revenue efficiencies. We did we were put forward to the regional school committee an increase in the high school student activity fees from $45 to $75, mainly based on the breadth of activities that are offered to our high school students and the cost of those and the stipends that we pay for the personnel who execute all the clubs and activities. So that was an increase of $9,000. Everything else is relatively stable. And just again, the education piece, that last line item called excess and deficiency. If you're used to being in your towns and hear them talking about free cash, that the region is technically a small municipality. And so we do have our free cash is called excess and deficiency. The $210,000 that's being applied to next year's budget represents more revenue that we received this year than we budgeted. So whenever we receive more revenue than we thought in one year, we credit that back to the towns in the following year. So that is that line item. So again, you'll see total operating revenues of the 26 million. And then if we look at the flip side of how we spend that money, oh, I'm having such difficulty tonight. And I'll show you that in a second. It's not, there we go. So this is where the categories of our expenditures are. And as we mentioned earlier, obviously salaries and benefits is a huge piece of our budget. That's basically what drives it. And typically, you would see our salaries and other compensation probably being in the increase range of a little over 3%. The 1.98% you see is the impact that we're seeing from staffing changes and retirements. So that definitely can help the region's budget in any given year that we do have personnel changes. The benefits, again, I mentioned to you that our Norfolk County was decreased. The other thing that's sitting in fiscal year 21 that is not dollar for dollar coming into fiscal year 22 was a $100,000 OPEB contribution that we did add on last year. The other expenditures being down by 75,000, partly piece of that is the trend budgeting that we continue to do. The other piece is savings that we're seeing from technology. So as you know, with COVID onset, we purchased a lot of technology this past year to make sure our educators had new laptops, that all of our students had a one-to-one device, and we were able to use COVID CARES money for that, so that we purchased more in one year than we typically do. Therefore, we don't have the normal replacement cycle that's usually in our budget. So that was a savings. And we also had some additional savings in just some special education services. Transportation represents both our regular yellow school buses that we have and the annual increase on that. And there also is our athletic transportation. And then buildings and grounds, we have remained relatively flat in increases. The slight decrease you see is because we were able to do a communication audit on our telephone systems, and we actually were able to reduce our telephone costs or utility costs by about $7,000. So that's the decrease you're seeing there. And again, we still are have some debt outstanding on the middle school, but that continues to go down each year. So that gives you an overview of how we fund the operations and a little bit of what the operations consist of. So the other piece that the region takes care of is their capital request. So we do have project requests for next year totaling $355,500. That includes replacement of all the hot water systems, both at the middle school and the high school. We have several flooring related projects, both in the middle school and high school. We're going to be completing our paving. We've got around the middle school pieces that we still need to do. And we've identified some ductwork insulation on Lenquist that we'll be replacing. We do intend to work with green community representatives for possible grant funding for the hot water heater projects, which would then offset our total cost. And we have enough in our excess and deficiency accounts that we actually are asking the school committee tonight to use these funds to cover the fiscal year 22 projects. Maggie, I'll swing it back to you for the last thank yous.
Yeah. I can't say enough thank yous to Dawn and to her team in the business office, as well as obviously to Dr. Keogh and Mrs. McCoy and to Mr. Smith and Mr. Kellett and all the department leaders and other district leadership that have really cooperated to put what I feel like is a very responsible, but also respectful of our a budget that's responsible, but also really respectful of our goals. I'm really excited. So thank you also to all of the donors and other financial supporters of the school districts. Much of your work and your donations are what makes us able to do all the pretty fantastic things beyond what the budget can support. So thank you very much. I believe at this time, Dawn, is our time for community comment on the topic of budget, correct?
Correct. Okay.
So at this time, if you have a comment to make from the general community on the topic of the budget, we'd be interested to hear it. You can use your hand raising function in the reactions bar of your tool, of your Zoom, or you can just unmute your video and wave your hand wildly and we'll try and find you. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume that the lack of comments means that people are happy with the budget. So that's great news. Colleagues, do you have comments, questions, things that you would like more information about at this point in the budget process? Yes, Michael.
Don, just a nit clarification, perhaps, on the budget drivers. The retirement assessment was lowered by, was it 40,000 or 40%?
40,000.
Okay, thank you.
$40,000.
All right. Dawn, I noticed that none of the budget and has an inclusion of sort of our extra COVID funds and the grants and things that have been available to us with COVID. Now I know that lies outside of the operating budget, but what's your forecast in terms of what kind of funding do we have that we used already or that we still have that we could use, and that what are we looking at for next year? Because while we're hoping schools are back, it's definitely going to continue to be an extra burden in terms of keeping things
Right, so I did summarize that in your fiscal year 21 monthly financial report. So we have received at the beginning of the school year what everyone's been referring to as the CARES reopening grant, and that was approximately $280,000. That definitely was a lifesaver for the region because it allowed us to buy all the technology we needed, buy the PPE, have the tents, do the HVAC engineering study, provide funding for the AFC urgent care for our testing. It provided the opportunity for multiple workshop days for all of our teachers and the trainings for that. That was another large piece. So we have actually expended all of the $280,000. In addition, we were given a state coronavirus prevention fund grant that we just received. That's like $35,000 that has to be used by June 30th. So some of the expenses that we're incurring a little bit for this next reopening phase, that's been a nice gift that we've received to be able to accommodate that. We have also received what they're calling the Elementary and Secondary Education Emergency Relief Funds. It's called ESSER. So we've got an ESSER 1 and an ESSER 2. ESSER 1 was on the smaller side. It was approximately $37,000. The ESSER 2 grant that just came out with December knew all the relief that was approved in December was a little bit more substantial, and it was just under $150,000. The way we stand now, both ESSER grants we're going to have to cover us for fiscal year 22, and the ESSER 2 grant actually extends to fiscal year 23. So any learning lags or leftover ramifications from the COVID, they've made sure we do have some funds to take care of that for the next 2 years. So that it's not impacting the normal operating budget of school districts. So I think we're in good shape with the second ESSER grant to sort of continue to support our students and staff for fiscal year 22 and 23.
Okay. Are there any other, and all of that is separate from, like, you know, when I watch the news and they talk about $1 gajillion coming our way, that's separate. Is that correct?
Coming our way. So there could be additional funding.
Okay.
So the second round of funding we received was because of what was passed at the end of December.
Okay.
But I think there is potentially more funding coming. We just don't, that hasn't been identified or actually approved yet. So there could be more funding coming if there's any additional from the new package that's coming out, that could trickle down to more funding for schools through the states.
Not that I'm trying to be greedy, but as we think along, I'm just thinking about, you know, what are our levers that we can pull. Michael, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. A related note, Dawn, to the extent that we, the ESSER 2 or 1 and 2 funds are not adequate to cover, lack of a better word, remedial, you know, services, or just kind of getting teaching and learning back to where we need to be. What is our E&D position for 2022?
So we're at our cap right now, you know, we're looking to take some of the surplus we have in operations this year to pay for capital, but we could potentially still have a little bit left that would make us exceed our E&D. So our E&D is probably we're fully funded right now, but I will say we have also opportunities. Well, we also have other grants that could be used to shore us up if we come up with other expenses that we don't have. The expenses that we don't have funding for. But yes, if we ran into any kind of emergencies, that we do have E&D that we could draw upon.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Okay. Well, with that, I would like to invite a motion. I would like to invite a motion to adopt the fiscal 22 budget in the amount of $26,379,191, which is reduced by estimated receipts and available funds in the amount of $3,480,998 for a net amount to be assessed to the member town of 20 towns, I think, towns, there might be an S missing, of $22,898,203, comprised of $22,021,703 in operating expenses and $876,500 in debt expenses, and that the treasurer be authorized to certify this budget in the apportioned share of each town based on the statutory method.
So moved.
Michael Jaffe? Second?
Lynn Collins, second.
Motion made by Michael Jaffe, second by Lynn Collins. Could I have all of my members unmute? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate Potter?
Kate Potter, yes.
Judy Miller?
Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn Collins?
Lynn Collins, yes.
Michael Jaffe?
Michael Jaffe, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. And while she can't join us tonight, Ann Hovey would like the record to reflect that she is very supportive of the fiscal 22 budget. I would like to move on to invite a motion to support our capital projects.
Oh, Maggie, to do the motion for E and D.
Oh, I just missed that. Thank you, Dawn. Okay. I would like to invite a motion to approve the utilization of $210,000 of the June 30, 2020 certified excess and deficiency funds for the fiscal 22 budget.
Judy
Jaffe,
Miller,
so
so
moved.
moved.
I'm going to say Judy Miller, motion made by Judy Miller. Michael, would you second?
Michael Jaffe, second.
Second by Michael Jaffe, if you can unmute. Michael Jaffe,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Lynn Collins,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy Miller,
Judy Miller, yes.
Kate Potter,
Kate Potter, yes.
and Maggie Sharon, yes. And Ann Hovey would like us to know she also supports this as well. We're going to move on to capital. I would like to invite a motion to transfer $355,500 of June 30th, 2020 certified excess and deficiency funds to the region's capital fund in order to cover costs for approved fiscal year 22 capital projects.
Kate Potter, so moved.
Thank you, Kate. Second?
Michael Jaffe, second.
Thanks. Motion made by Kate Potter, seconded by Michael Jaffe. Judy Miller,
Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn Collins,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Michael Jaffe,
Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter,
Potter, yes.
and Maggie Sharon, yes. With that, I think that we have officially approved our fiscal 22 budget, correct?
Correct.
That's fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
So I think we are moving on to item 7 on our agenda, which is probably the reason why we have 173 folks joining us tonight, which is the topic of further reopening of the middle school and high school. And Andrew, you have a report for us.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm going to ask to screen share for a moment. I see that you've given me that, Dawn. Thank you.
So Andrew, can I ask you a question? Do you prefer that we take community comment before or after your report?
I think it, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay, I'm having problems. It said my Zoom quit unexpectedly, so.
Oh, well, it sounds like maybe it would be better to do it before then? Or what do you think?
Oh, well, my,
Well, you're still here, so
okay, so now can you see it?
Well, it just says that Zoom quit unexpectedly.
Let's try this one more time.
there you go. Wait. Oh. It was there for a brief second.
Yeah, I can't quite understand this. I think it's fine if people offer their input. It may be impacted a little bit by what I say, I would imagine, but that's fine, Maggie, until I can get this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log off and try and log on again, and hopefully that will resolve the issue on my end.
Okay.
Does that
Do you
make
think-
sense?
Yeah, that's fine.
Maggie, do
Yeah.
you think it will be, I just wonder if there's anything that will be said that may answer questions and then alleviate the need.
Yeah, I mean,
for-
I think that would be my ideal choice. So why don't we give Dr. Keogh a minute to see if he can rejoin us, and then assuming he can come back, because I also don't want to like stop. I really want to make sure that anybody who's here tonight who has something to share with us has time to do so, and I don't want to stop in the middle.
Well, that's fine.
Oh, good, you're back.
Yeah, I'm still here, but I'm gonna log out and try this again.
You have to go to your settings and kick your iPod.
How do I do that?
Okay. So folks who are joining us, we're just in a short interlude because Dr. Keogh's just gonna try and get back on and get his Zoom going.
Maggie, would you in the interest want to just jump and do my fiscal year 21 monthly report?
That's a great idea. That's fantastic. I loved the pictures attached to it. So thank you.
It was not, I didn't think anyone would believe me unless I showed you the picture. So as I've been doing with your normal monthly reports, anything in bold is the new information. So as of February 28th, obviously at that time, our E&D had been certified. So on the revenue, you see where the anticipated return of funds to the two towns are flowing against their assessment. We also went ahead and, even though we haven't received our first Chapter 71 transportation payment, took all the information that we know is out there and estimated what that our annual, or what our amount's going to be for fiscal year 22, which is the $455,000. So that now is flowing through your financial statements. So I think your revenue, your revenue statement, I actually tried to add some notes. And I think with all the discussion we've had about the budget now, hopefully seeing some of the notes on your monthly revenue statement is making more sense with some of the things we're doing with the fiscal year 22 budget. So it all dovetailed nicely. On the expenditure side, we didn't really change anything. So we're moving forward as we have been projecting. So that was nothing new to report there. The other financial updates I provided was that we did have a fairly substantial property related insurance claim that we filed with Maya. We actually had a microburst here on campus on November 15th that did quite a number to some of our HVAC equipment up on the middle school rooftop. I could actually see it from my office, how it was all tilted. So I did include a picture for school committee to see. We have had all that repaired, plus 4 of the condensers that were damaged were had significant damage, and that we actually had to replace them. So that drove up the total cost of that claim up to $32,612. We incurred the $1,000 deductible, but other than that, we received a check from Maya for $31,612 against that claim. So that work has all been completed, and the money actually has been received and has been netted out in your financial statements. The other thing in this report was actually just talking about the COVID-19 related grants, which we talked about during the budget, but there you have them sort of in writing in your report to refer back to as we continue on this year.
Thanks. I had the good fortune to be visiting campus on the Wednesday when the cranes were there to install the new brandy, sparkly new HVAC condensers. So maybe not everyone gets to see it, but you are now being HVAC'd by very, very nice air conditioners that had a crane put them on. Any other questions about the ongoing budget information? All right, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for the ongoing specific and detailed reports. They're like super helpful and really help, for me anyway, to answer a lot of the questions that I think I might have as I read through them. So I really appreciate it. Anyone tuning in who wants to read the monthly packets and cares about school finance, they are a treasure trove of great information. All right, do we have Dr. Keogh back yet? Okay, So I'm going to propose that we move on to item number 10 on our agenda, which is the annual vote on Massachusetts school law. So I just have to do a tiny bit of scrolling here. In Massachusetts, we have school choice, and historically, our school committee has chosen not to participate in school choice. What that means, and some folks who have been around longer than I have, is it means that our children can opt out of coming here and they could go to another school choice school. And in exchange, we would take children who opted to come here on school choice. So I think when you participate in it, it's kind of a both, you agree to both sides of it. No, Dawn, what is school choice then? Can you help me?
No. So we don't take any students from outside our districts, but
Yep.
our students can definitely go to other districts if they so choose. So you do have actually some school choice assessments against your Chapter 70, because we do have actually some students who go to other school choice.
Right,
schools.
but our school has
So
not.
we don't offer seats. Exactly.
Okay, so our students still can choose to go to a school choice other school. So we're not taking anything away from our students by not participating in this. They can still go to other schools.
Correct.
Great.
We simply don't think it's worth we don't think it's worth
Right.
it because we pay so much more than we get back from the state. We would pay $20,000 and get $5,000 back.
Okay, great. So any discussion on this from committee members? Yep, Lynn?
What is the purpose of this school choice?
I believe the purpose of the law, and Dr. Keogh, you can certainly help, is to help communities typically who have underperforming schools to give students a choice of going to different schools. So if you live in a community where schools are not what you would hope that they would be, that you would have the opportunity to go somewhere else or to a school which has a program that your town school does not offer, that you would be able to choose to go to schools that opt into school choice.
And sadly, some communities are really dependent on that. They're dependent on their school choice students.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have been fortunate enough that we've been able to make ends meet with the support from the two towns and the state, and we've never had the need to solicit other students. It also happens when a district has really declining enrollments, and they might need to fill their school up. This just isn't an area that typically has a lot of school choice, but you move out into the central and western part of the state, you see a lot more of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, I'm gonna invite a motion to have the Dover-Sherborn regional schools not participate in school choice for the 21-22 school year. Do I have anyone to make that motion?
Michael Jaffe, so moved.
Moved by Michael Jaffe. Any seconds?
Kate Potter, second.
Seconded by Kate Potter. If you can take yourselves off mute. Judy Miller?
Judy Miller, yes.
Kate Potter?
Kate Potter, yes.
Lynn Collins?
Lynn Collins, yes.
Michael Jaffe?
Michael Jaffe, yes.
And sorry, Maggie Sharon, yes. I see you're back, Dr. Keogh. We were just moving on with some business while you're getting set up again. So, while you're gone, we think it would be better if you can give your presentation, and then we'll invite community comments, and then we'll have a school committee discussion.
Yes, that sounds good. I really do hope that this works. My Zoom account crashed on me this afternoon, which has never happened. So I hope that's not like a permanent bug in my system, but let's give it a try. How's that?
You're there.
Good. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to this presentation regarding the further reopening of the Dover-Sherborn secondary schools. As you know, on February 9th, I shared my thinking around next steps for the district with regard to reopening. And as has been our experience throughout the pandemic, it felt to many like it was coming out of nowhere, and that it was a surprise. Such has been the case for so many of the announcements this year when you think about it, whether coming from the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, the federal government, the state government, the Department of Public Health, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. These kinds of shifts seem to have been endless. In fact, we've had so many changes over the past 12 months, it's hard not to resent the proposal of one other. But this has been the nature of the experience of operating school during the pandemic, and I recognize that it's not been easy for any of us, staff, students, families, or school committee members alike. In fact, though, considering the return of our middle school and high school students to 4-day in-person discussion has been on the minds of most of us for months now. We have been hearing the research and public debates and have on some level been aware that a decision on when to move forward was forthcoming. It was with all of this in mind that I shared my thinking on February 9th. In sharing my ideas for the next phase of reopening 6 to 8 weeks prior to the return of our secondary students, I was trying to be thoughtful about our many teachers and working families with young children who will need to adjust their childcare arrangements. I was thinking about our teachers who will need to adjust their teaching practices to accommodate more in-person learning. I was thinking about our administrators who will have to deal with schedules and the many logistical challenges that will need to be addressed. I was thinking about those who are anxious about expanding recovery and about where we will be with pool testing and where we should be with vaccinations. But above all else, I was thinking about our students. The global pandemic has taken the lives of 2.5 million people worldwide and 500,000 Americans. Each of us has been touched in some way and knows at least one person who's lost a friend or family member to the virus. Many of us have lost loved ones ourselves. It's been frightening, and we have a right to feel traumatized by the experience. But what about our students? Those who generally do not have a seat at the table tonight. Those who are not fully formed or have lengthy life experiences to help assure them that things are going to be okay. They've had one thing after another taken away and have had to simply do as they were told and fight through the fear of the unknown. They've worried about the health of each other and their family members and been forced to stay away from grandparents and other vulnerable loved ones for months on end. Mental health issues have skyrocketed for teens across the country, largely due to the isolation and disruption of their life routines. Just think about a small sampling of the damage done. Their learning experiences were altered almost beyond recognition. Nothing's been the same. They've lost out on complete athletic seasons and performing arts events, or have had them altered almost beyond recognition. You think about it, band and chorus in the parking lots, masks while playing sports without fans, virtual banquets and recognition ceremonies. They've lost out on hours and hours of social experiences. No proms, dances, class cruises, pep rallies, night football, tournament basketball games, no travel experiences, work experience, and perhaps most importantly, no unstructured opportunities getting to know their peers. The unfairness of this pandemic and its impact on young people cannot be fully measured, and most likely will never be regained. It is safe to say the children of this generation have been robbed of some of the key life events that are essential to healthy development and happy lives. It was from this very perspective that I proposed the reopening schedule on the 9th. Like so many of us, I desperately want our students to return to as normal a learning experience and especially lifestyle as possible. I also want to couple that with staff safety, and we've made this a priority over the last 12 months. After examining the science, research, and feedback from our key stakeholders, I remain convinced that returning can be done safely, but I'm going to present a small adjustment this evening in my thinking. So let's take a quick look at the data. Dover-Sherborn's infection rates have been steadily declining. This graph, developed by Dr. Vitale from the Sherburne Board of Health, tracks the rates since July in Dover and Sherburne, I should say. You can see here that our daily case rate per 100,000 is currently at approximately 10. It was at 45 in July. Our combined test positivity rate has dropped below 1% for the first time since November. Our numbers across the system are relatively low as well. So it's important to note, of the 72 cases we've had across our 4 schools, there's been only 1 case of in-school transmission, and that was an instance of an adult to a student. We've not had instances of student to student or student to faculty transmission, nor have we had instances of faculty to faculty transmission. We're fortunate, in fact, that we've not had instances of any clusters in our 4 schools, and have proven through contact tracing in all instances of well over 100 contacts that the infections have come from home or other outside sources. It's a clearly established fact. Infections are not happening in the Dover-Sherborn schools. This isn't through good fortune or chance alone. Our layers and layers of protective measures and protocols have worked and will continue to work if we adhere to them strictly. Interestingly, as pointed out recently by Dr. Peterson of the Dover Board of Health, our statistics align directly with that of the worldwide research gathered during the pandemic, suggesting that in-person learning can be conducted safely, with or without vaccinations. Yet, this has done little to alleviate everyday anxiety in schools. It goes without saying that in the age of the internet, one can find research to support almost any argument related to whether or not schools are safe to reopen further. But some of the world's most respected medical organizations have weighed in on the topic, not the least of which being the American Academy of Pediatrics. They've publicly supported the further reopening of schools, but they've done so with the caveat that the, quote, layers of protection, end quote, must remain in place. Likewise, they suggest that expanded reopenings are most appropriate in communities where the infection rates are low, such as ours. The Massachusetts chapter of the Academy of Pediatrics recently weighed in on the topic as well, writing, "Our children have been experiencing adverse mental health outcomes and heightened risk for other non-communicable diseases during the pandemic, which we feel are directly related to losing the social, physical, and learning benefits of in-school learning. The MCAAP recommends all districts offer universal in-person school utilizing rigorous public health strategies, masking, hand hygiene, testing, contact tracing, building safety, and distancing, while simultaneously allowing for adjustments such as the 3 to 6 foot distancing that will allow more students to return to safe in-person learning." With all of this in mind, we decided it'd be helpful to take a snapshot of where our stakeholders sit on the topic of returning to school, because obviously we've heard a lot from people since my announcement. The feedback's been fascinating and the comments incredibly insightful. I'll share some of that, of what people wrote, in a moment. But here's a look at what our middle school students told us. 186 students responded to this question, with 74% saying they were in support of more in-person learning. Likewise, 330 of our high school students weighed in. It's interesting to consider that when asked to answer freely, without influence or pressure, close to 60% of our students asked for more in-person learning. That surprised me, as over the course of my entire career, I've never felt that more than 50% of high school students were seeking to be in school. When you think about it, typically teenage students will take any chance they can to get some time off, and now the majority are asking for an increase in in-person learning. I think they genuinely miss their teachers and their peers. It is concerning, however, that some of our staff, 22 in this case from the middle school, so not a huge segment of the population, but a reasonable number, are still not feeling comfortable with the plan to return to 4-day in-person instruction. We've sought feedback about their concerns and have heard clearly that they feel less safe with more students in the building. They worry that our students will not be able to spread out. They are uncomfortable using rooms without windows and would like to be vaccinated before returning our students. These are legitimate concerns, and we've sought to address them. For example, we are maintaining the 5.5 foot distancing in the classrooms and are able to feed our students in a variety of locations where they can spread out. Our passing times, which we will seek to stagger, involve individuals passing each other for limited periods of time. Our health experts tell us that individuals need to be in the same space for 15 minutes of stagnant air before the quality becomes a concern. To be extra safe, we've had our ventilation systems reviewed by an independent engineering firm and have been told that all of our spaces are properly ventilated and the system's functioning well. But just to be safe, we are placing freestanding HEPA air filtration units in any classrooms that do not have windows. Our high school staff, or a large percentage of the 25 who participated in this survey, are also feeling concerned about the 4-day return. Of all the concerns brought forward, the question of vaccination seems to be the loudest. We collectively all feel that vaccinations cannot come fast enough. We continue to hold that K-12 educators will be being vaccinated soon. Our staff who are 65 or above, those with 2 comorbidities, our nurses and mental health staff have been receiving vaccinations. Many of those doses have come through AFC urgent care. We remain hopeful that the governor will allow AFC to provide vaccinations to staff and are confident this can be done quickly once that approval is granted. However, there remains the chance that educators across Massachusetts may have to be vaccinated at other state-run sites. We may have no control over that. Our medical consultants who serve both on our local boards of health and the Health and Hygiene Committee frequently talk to us about having layers of protection in our fight against the coronavirus. We traditionally think of masking, frequent hand washing, staying home when symptomatic, and social distancing. Clearly, vaccinations could serve as an additional layer of protection, or certainly would feel like an additional layer of protection. The question is, what if teachers are not vaccinated? Can schools still operate safely? We believe so, and have heard this time and again from our health professionals. The message has been, as long as we're sticking closely to our safety protocols, our staff and students can return to school safely with or without vaccinations. So this is some feedback from our families, and not surprisingly, it shows a significant percentage desiring the return to 4-day instruction, with 87.2% at the middle school seeking return and 12.8% opposed to it. At the high school, 85% of families are in favor of the 4-day return, while 15% oppose it. Also interesting is the information pertaining to our remote students and the impact a return would have on them. In this case, we asked, if your child currently attends school in person 2 days a week, would they move to remote if we changed to 4 days in person per week? 87 people answered yes. This question asked, if your child's currently a remote learner, would they transition back to in-person learning if we moved to a 4-day in-person model? 100 people answered that their children would return to in-person. So 100 versus 87 proves to essentially to be a wash, with perhaps a few more students returning to in-person than remaining remote. So before moving on, I'd like to take a quick minute to review a small sampling of the narrative statements shared through our surveys. These two are insightful. I will post these afterwards because we really don't have time to read through all these, but I'll just grab one or two. I think we will have a couple of, this is, I think, a middle school student. I think we'll have a couple of weeks for 4 days, but then since there's not even enough room for everyone, it will be unsafe and we will go fully remote. I like the ratio we have now, and I'd rather go 2 days a week than be fully remote. Another one, I'd love to go back to school and see some of my other friends. I've also felt like I can't stand the Zooms anymore, especially being almost a year into COVID. And anyone who saw Zoomsicle this past weekend, which by the way is still available streaming, but anyone who saw that knows that the Zooming has been a challenge for the kids. These are some comments from our staff. For me personally, switching to 4 days doesn't change my schedule or cause a big disruption. I'd prefer that teachers were vaccinated before this change. For others, this is a big change, and I hope that concerns will be addressed and flexibility provided to those that need it. Another one, if we remove our most powerful weapons against the virus, just limited people in the building and social distancing, we risk further isolating our vulnerable students who may no longer feel comfortable socializing during breaks in school spaces that will be much more crowded, or may feel unsafe in school in person at all. Thus, we may be asking their families to choose between their child's health and their much needed in-person IEP services. You can see there's a lot of passion here. And finally, from the parents, we had quite a few parents, 500 plus parents participate. So this is a very, very tiny sampling. But for example, I'm supportive of the reopening, but I do very much wish teachers would be fully vaccinated. The academic slip and the mental toll on these kids is immeasurable. Thank you for moving in the direction of getting them back in school. But let's face it, it's clear that we're not all of one opinion on the school reopening in general. Although we've accomplished great things and there's been much give and take over the last 12 months, there are still many differences of opinion and the stakes are very high. In order to move forward, I feel we must empathize with those with differing opinions and find the middle ground. As such, I'm adjusting my original recommendation and am now suggesting that we move the timeline of our middle school start by 2 weeks to coincide with the high school return on April 5th. My rationale for this is that it will allow more time for teacher vaccinations and will keep us consistent with plans coming out of our neighboring communities. Likewise, it will allow 5 weeks for staff and families to prepare for the change. In the end, it results in our middle school staff and students missing out on 4 additional days of in-person learning, if you consider that we're in for half a week at a time now. And although these are critical, I still feel that in the name of reaching a middle ground, this is the correct course of action. Obviously, these changes are contingent upon Board of Health final approval. We've had support from our Health and Hygiene Committee, but that's not the final word. I believe they're having a meeting tomorrow and we'll discuss this. Of course, increases to rates of infection would trigger Health and Hygiene review and a possible return to 2-day model or even remote. Nobody knows where this is going to go. But until all students can be vaccinated, we'll still be monitoring infection rates and be offering remote learning as an option to all students. But as a system, we have to start thinking about the future of DS. We have to factor in that if you think realistically about this, would anyone want to go into work when they can work from home more? Or would students want to go to school more if they could do it from home? So I'm worried that we're getting into a comfort zone and that we're not going to want to come out of it. I've heard from the staff that that's not the case, and I trust them on that. But I do think just collectively as a system, we need to start wrapping our heads around this. And I personally feel like the better we get back in, the better we will be in the long term. And finally, just another shot at this social contract and safety in general. Our systems worked because people have largely honored our safety protocols of masking, distancing, not coming to school when symptomatic, and honoring state gathering sizes and, most importantly, travel mandates. If we're to move forward with these plans, we must continue to adhere to these requirements. And with that, I will take questions. I am just going to say before we do that, though, that I took out a slide that went into some heavy detail about the steps that we've been taking as an administration to, mitigating steps to address things like our lunchrooms, to address things like our spaces and storage. A lot of that has gone on and will continue to go on. And having the time at the middle school, the additional 2 weeks at the middle school, and moving us all to April 5th, I think will allow us to resolve a lot of that.
Okay. I think what I'm gonna do, because I know with community comments, especially given there's like 180 people on here, questions and answers could get really, really rough. So we're gonna do community comments, and that's just like it always is. It's a commentary, and we want to hear from you. If you want to talk, we will absolutely hear you out. Try to keep your comments to about 2 minutes or less. And then I know all of the school committee members will be writing down questions. So absolutely, if you have a question, we won't answer it, but we are going to try when we move into our discussion portion of this, we'll try and make sure your question gets addressed.
Maggie,
Yeah.
can Andrew unscreen share? So
Yeah, I was getting there.
Okay, and do you want me to timer or help you at all?
So, okay. So I would love it if all of the members, Judy, if you can take point on watching. I see Amelia Slosby has her hands up and Laura McGovern. And I'll take, in the order that we find them, we'll take them. I might try to kind of go back and forth between different constituents if I can make that happen in any elegant way. We'll listen to whatever folks have to say. I think it's really important. First of all, Dr. Keogh, I very much appreciated your presentation. I think, something that you said that was important is these are really important decisions and the stakes can't be higher. And it's, it's honestly, it's hard to sit in all these seats and be in a position to make these decisions. And also, I feel really fortunate to be in this community at this time with an opportunity to have some influence on this as well. All right, Amelia.
Thank you. I just will say a quick thank you to everyone who's worked on this. I think the district has done such an amazing job and we really feel safe with our kids at school, and just thank you. I also really appreciate you listening to the faculty feedback and think that is so important. So thank you for that front. My concern is one thing we haven't seen is I have such concerns with the traffic around the school that if we're doubling the population at the middle school and high school and the backups on Junction Street and Farm Street, and I feel like kids are darting out in the parking lot, it feels extremely dangerous at times. And I just feel like if we're doubling that, I would love to know what the district has plans for that, whether it's more police details or I have no idea what rerouting options are there, but just I would love to see information on that as well, because I think that's an important safety factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Slosby. Mrs. McGovern.
Hi, thanks, Maggie. I'm speaking on behalf of the Dover-Sherborn Education Association, and I just want to read a statement that I think is very important for the community to hear. To the members of our DS learning community, we do not believe the district should ask teachers to enter phase 4 without educators having the opportunity to be fully vaccinated. Phase 4 suggests a community-wide adjustment to address the immediate needs of some members of the community, but we believe that you may not be giving enough weight to the long-term impact of the decision on all members of the community. The school does not exist to only serve the students in the short term. The long-term health and stability of the community is based on our ability to make collaborative decisions that are in the best interests of the school community, both now and into the future. As teachers have not been consistently part of the conversation about the phase 4 plan, we appreciate the opportunity to engage at this point in the process. By announcing the phase 4 plan publicly without sharing it with the teachers first or giving us time to ask questions, we've created a relationship where the teachers do not feel like they're a valued part of the community. To truly serve our current student body, we need our school system to be in excellent shape in coming years. Though we truly look forward to returning to the school building full time, the arguments presented so far simply do not convince us that a few extra weeks will provide enough short-term benefit to overcome the long-term negative impacts described herein. Becoming comfortable with unknowns has been a part of our process in grappling with this pandemic. However, there are some things we do know, and there are additional aspects of this decision that we wonder about. We know about our current status of in-person student learning time. According to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education dashboard on student learning time, both Pine Hill and Chickering are at the 80th percentile of hours of live student learning when compared with 303 districts. At the middle school level, we're at the 66th percentile of live student learning hours when compared to 297 districts. And at the high school level, we're at the 66th percentile of live student learning hours when compared to 302 school districts. We know how the teachers feel. 209 of the 215 full-time educators, which represents 97% of the Dover-Sherborn Education Association, responded to a survey about a return to 4 days at the region and 5 days at the elementary schools. 80% reported that they will feel comfortable moving to 4 days at the region and 5 days at the elementary level when fully vaccinated. We also know that according to our district-generated COVID emails with COVID infection notifications, district-wide, we've had 25 positive cases where people did participate in school and 32 did not participate in school. These numbers are low. However, these numbers only tell half the story. For the number of positive people who were in school, we know many others have had to quarantine because of contact tracing identification. We wonder what is the possible percentage increase of people identified as close contacts by moving into phase 4. These additional close contacts who must quarantine for 10 days will cause increased disruption to the learning process for students and teachers. We know that vaccinated teachers don't have to quarantine if they're close contacts, so we believe this benefit should be a consideration in the shift. We share your concern about the social emotional health of our students. We wonder, having been presented with national and state data, has any data been collected and shared on the impact of a 2-day model on the social and emotional health of DS students? We wonder, how will we measure the potential gains of these schedule shifts in terms of better social emotional health if we don't have a known and understood starting point? We know we have anecdotal data on moving the curriculum forward, and we know recent efforts have been made to understand these impacts. While we know our current model hasn't been seamless, we wonder how we can better communicate the curricular progress to families to alleviate some of their concerns. We hear conflicting messages about the safety of the phase 4 plan, so we have many unknowns in perhaps the most critical area of safety. We have both heard that it would undoubtedly be safer and absolutely reduce the risks to teachers to be vaccinated before entering phase 4. We've also heard that it's safe for us to enter phase 4 without full vaccination. As you might expect, these conflicting messages are causing concern and anxiety. We know that many of our colleagues, including elementary educators, special educators, and guidance personnel, are back in person 4 days already, and regional educators imagine we are being told this to imply that it's our turn. While we know these colleagues are back in person, we also know we should not assume that these staff members aren't experiencing anxiety and concern. While we consider these mixed messages, we do know that if we're given the chance to receive the first vaccine dose, we will have peace of mind and relief that many of our vaccinated colleagues and family members have shared with us. We know that 2 weeks after the first dose, the working environment will be significantly safer. We know that returning to school with fully vaccinated teachers who feel safe and valued and thus are able to support and engage with all of their students is significantly better for the school community than forcing teachers back into a situation that does not feel safe and where a teacher's ability to help students and deliver instruction may be diminished. During this unprecedented period of instability, we know that our school community needs the full resources and benefits of a healthy community. And a healthy community includes teachers who feel heard, safe, and are able to fully focus on teaching and supporting students. In closing, phase 4 seems to value the health of this moment's students over the mental health of the educators, many of whom will remain in the system for 20+ years. We urge you to consider the long-term health of the entire school community. We know the school system exists to serve our students. We know we're drawn to teaching to serve our students. But the school exists to serve all students, current and future, and we know that the best way to ensure the health of our school community, both now and in the future, is to ensure the current teachers feel valued, heard, respected, and perhaps most importantly, safe. We are asking again that we are allowed the opportunity to be fully vaccinated before entering phase 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McGovern. Mr. Lin.
Thank you, Maggie. Again, first, I want to thank Dr. Keel and the school committee and everybody here working so hard. I think it's fantastic. You know, the year has been hard, but you guys doing great. Follow the signs and try to balance all interests. The key word here is balance, right? You can't be one-sided. So I'm a Dover parent, so I have kids in all different schools. And what I heard is mentally they want to in school. I know it's hard, 100%, but I think this plan right now, the new phase is a very careful plan. Look at the number and gradually advance to a better stage. Everybody want to be vaccinated. We all want a perfect situation, but it will never be. The variants also coming. We need to be agile. So that's the second word, agility. Just be careful. If things getting worse, we need to be flexible, pulling back. If things getting better, we slowly moving ahead. That's all I wanted, the balance for everybody and the good thing. And just one anecdote to my kids in high school. I know one time I asked, say, hey, there's elective courses, you want to be in person and there's no in-person classes available. And the guidance counselor say, can you do online? And she just said, online. I would say, why? You can do online. You can learn everything from online. And she said, well, and I understand, I don't want to push. I say, online is good alternative so far, but it's just an alternative. So there will never be. Otherwise, all the good school will be just closing. Everything is online. That would be nice, right? Well, it will never be. So I really applaud this careful effort, but be very, very flexible as the numbers change and the things change. We all need to follow the rules. We can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Do I have other members of the community to offer community comment? Mrs. Padelka.
Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Keough and the school committee for listening. And I do want to just say thank you to our school administration and nurse that what they've been doing this year is just heroic. My name is Janelle Padelka. I'm an English teacher at Dover-Sherborn Middle School. I'm speaking tonight to share a bit about our school community. While it's easy these days to get caught up in the national debate about school reopenings, with those in favor sharing science to make their arguments and those against presenting equally compelling data to refute, I hope we can recognize that our school is not every other school and that the experience of the students in our building, and I'm speaking about the middle school, need to be first and foremost in the decision-making process. Unlike many other schools in the country, Dover-Sherborn Middle School has offered in-person instruction continuously since the start of the academic year through our hybrid model. We have WIN advisory groups to make the kids feel connected, teams of teachers and guidance counselors looking out for them and catching them when they fall. The students have adjusted to the ins and the outs of the schedule. They are learning and they're safe. The middle school, however, is a crowded place. With our hybrid model, we are able to maintain social distancing in distinct cohorts. Yet even with our adapted schedule, middle schoolers move throughout the building about 8 times a day, 4 for class and 4 for mask or lunch breaks. If we return to 4-day instruction, approximately 29 of the classrooms, most without sinks for hand washing, will be used by more than one teacher during the school day. 19 of these classrooms are fully booked all day long, meaning that teachers, when they have prep periods, will need to move to public spaces such as the library or the faculty room to participate in confidential IEP or team meetings in public places. When in-person exposures happen, something that will be more likely if we're in person more often, students and teachers across multiple classrooms will need to quarantine and will find ourselves in need of more subs. More than anything else, though, the hybrid model has allowed us to stay true to Dover-Sherborn's mission statement to support all students. And I think it's of note that like 25 of the students felt uncomfortable in person. We get to connect with those who crave the in-person interaction with the hybrid model, but we protect those with family circumstances who require more stringent safety measures. Our remote students don't feel as isolated, and we keep the interests of our whole community in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Padelka. Community comments, Ms. Phelan.
My name is Kim Phelan. I'm also a teacher at the middle school. And I'd like to thank Dr. Keough for the willingness to adjust plans on the fly. Like Ms. Padelka, I would like to address some of the unique things about our school, and that is the crowding. We believe we've been able to be safe because of the cohorts that we've done until this point. If we're doubling the number of students in the school by bringing them all back, our cohorting strategy goes away. All of a sudden, we're going to be mixing. The students are going to be together at lunch. You've got students that haven't seen each other for a year that are going to be very, very excited to be back together with their peers. And that's something that's going to be very challenging to manage with students. The number one thing that the CDC was saying we needed to do is maintain cohorts, maintain our social distancing and the masking. And we've been doing a fantastic job at the schools with this. It will become exceptionally challenging to do that with more people. And we all want to be in school. I want you all to recognize that. I love teaching, and it's much better to teach, much easier, much more fun to be doing it in person. However, there are real concerns that we have. And like Ms. Piedelka addressed, we are concerned about inequities, especially for those students that are remote. Right now, the remote students have an equal experience with the other students for half the week. If we go back to 4 days in person school, they no longer have that equitable experience with the other students. That will make those students more isolated, more withdrawn, and less able to participate. That's a real concern of every teacher I know. Further, with a vaccine just around the corner, the vaccination of staff members, yes, we're hoping for it to come for everybody as soon as possible. Hopefully students by the summer. But vaccination makes a big difference because it will be nearly impossible to find subs in the school. And as there's community transmission and spread with the new variants, we're going to have to quarantine. If we are quarantining, especially if we have a whole team out, who is doing the teaching? So that's one of my major concerns. I am not 25 anymore. I have a 25-year-old family member who 6 months after he had COVID is still struggling with many health-related issues because of that. That gives me some concerns. Again, I love teaching. I love this job. I want to feel like I'm safe doing it and that I can do the best job possible for all of our students, not just those that can be in school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Phelan. Mrs. Malloy?
Thank you. Kim, I'm sorry to hear about your son. Sadly, this is the reality that we live in these days. And like somebody else mentioned, there are, more variants out there. And these vaccinations apparently only give us immunity for possibly 3, maybe 4 months. We're not really sure. So I'm not sure what the alternative is. Our kids being online for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Chickering School has been back 4 days a week successfully. My son is at St. Sebastian's School in Needham. He's been back 5 days a week since September, and it's been great. There's been, no problems. There's been no student to teacher transmission. So I have grave concerns that yes, like Dr. Keough said, people are becoming complacent, wanting to work from home. So those are my feelings. And I feel like our kids should be back 4 days, if not 5 days a week. And this is the reality we live in. So, vaccines, they're not going to be the cure-all. So what are we going to do going forward? Online teaching forever? That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Malloy. Do I have any other comments from the community? Mrs. Sorrell. Marcia? Mrs. Sorrell?
Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm Marcia Sorrell, and I'm a teacher at the middle school. And I echo everyone's thanks to the school committee, Dr. Keough, and our school administration. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you directly. I love teaching and I love my students. And for that reason, I've been working endless hours to do my job. As much as I'd like to see my students more, I'm extremely uncomfortable returning to school 4 days a week without the protection of being fully vaccinated, despite what the health experts say. They may have the data, but they are not listening to how we feel or how it's impacting our mental health. I appreciate a delay of 2 additional weeks, but it still does not address the need to be fully vaccinated before returning to 4 days. Teaching with the hybrid model and coming in twice a week causes the anxiety because of risk of exposure with in-person teaching. Coming in 4 days will double the risk and the anxiety level that impacts our ability to teach effectively. Once the 2 cohorts of students are together, I can only imagine the close contact we'll see among the students as they reunite after being away from each other for months. With the state relaxing restrictions and people being tired of quarantining, it's a greater risk that the virus will spread in the community and then in the schools. Now there's the risk of the variant strains of COVID arising too. Over 30 states already offer vaccines to teachers as it's a prerequisite for opening schools. With teachers next in line in Massachusetts, and I understand President Biden just recently urged the vaccination of school staff by the end of March, it seems to me that it makes sense to hold off on returning to 4 days until our staff has that option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sorrell. Other community comments? Mrs. Novich.
Hi, thank you so much. And I think this is a great forum for just people speaking their mind, and we all come from very different places.
They have pushing back the open dates. Can you turn the TV on?
As a parent of a senior and somebody who feels that I kind of agree with Mrs. Malloy that the vaccines are not going to be the cure-all for this. People need to understand we need to move forward. Our kids need to be in class. We're doing a great job. You guys are amazing. But other schools around us are going back. And, you know, I have family members in other states who have kids 5 days a week. They've been doing this since October. There haven't been issues. We're in a very small school district. Have huge numbers like Boston. Boston's going back now. That's very exciting for those kids. They're going back part-time, I know, but I just think that if we can do what is recommended with the 6 feet apart, the masking up, and you know, looking at my daughter with these children she's around, her friends, they are so safe. They take this so serious. And, you know, the high school especially, I think could have been in school even earlier than the elementary because they are, you know, owning this. They get it. They've been taught it. They know it. And they're really putting their best foot forward. And I think for their mental health, for their education, yes, the online has been doing a good job, but there's nothing like being in person. So I respectfully, you know, I love that you guys are doing the best you can, but I really, really encourage us to try to get back in person, you know, 4 or 5 days a week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Novich. I have Mrs. Murphy and Mr. Guarini. Ms. Murphy?
I just want to express that my wholehearted agreement with what Cindy was just saying, and I'm not going to repeat her, but I will challenge the statistics on mental health, particularly among the middle schoolers and high schoolers. There's national data saying that suicidal ideation is up. Our emergency rooms are overwhelmed with patients, with mental health patients of this age group, and we're not doing them any service by keeping them out of school. The 3 feet have been proven to be fine in terms of social distancing, and I'd really encourage everyone to take a step back and say, who are we serving? We are serving our children, and that is who we should be focused on. I completely understand the teachers' fears, and I really hope that you're paying attention to the science and less so to the rumors and any other forums that you might be listening to, because the private schools have been full-time since September with no incidents of transmissions. And they're private schools in Needham, in Canton, all around us. So we encourage you really to look at the data and follow the current thinking on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Murphy. Mr. Guarini and then Mr. Moss.
Yeah, lots of good points on both sides. 2 things I just would love to reinforce that I think are really critical here. I think the first one is we spent a lot of time coming up with great protocols and protective measures, and the Board of Health has been very helpful through all this. And many of the people on that Board of Health are COVID experts. And, being able to use that system to manage the go forward plan here is a huge asset to us. We've used it effectively for the last 3 to 4 months. While we've seen cases here and there pop up, I think everybody has been calm and cool about it. We've done the contact tracing. So we've got everything we need to manage this. And if things go the wrong direction, we know what has to happen, as Dr. Keogh pointed out. The second thing I would point out is it is a community effort here. And, I have friends that are teachers at the school just because of the coaching I've done and how I've got to know people from my own kids. And we've been very resilient in the way that we've responded. And I think it's commendable for the school committee, Dr. Keogh and his staff and all the teachers. I think, now I think the opportunity is for us to shift into being creative. And, there are some challenges that people have pointed out there. The traffic, which we started on, I think there were points that people have raised about the fountains. There's been things around lunch. The parents in this community are more than willing to work with the school committee and the teachers to make whatever needs to happen. We have the resources financially, we have people that can step up and help. And as a community, we've risen to the challenge in the past. And I think that that's something we should be prepared to tap moving forward. So I'm in complete support of getting us back. The kids need this. I want to see my senior have a year. I want the juniors to get ready for SATs so they can get into good colleges. And I just think we all need to get back to some semblance of normal life. So, I think that this is the right strategy. We apply the protocols and we work as a community, and we can do this successfully.
Thank you, Mr. Guarini. Mr. Moss.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments. I just have one quick question, or I guess something for the committee to think about, which is if the benchmark for return to 5 days, getting all the teachers vaccinated, how will we move forward if some of the teachers are not comfortable in being vaccinated and the rest are? And so I think that benchmark is, I agree, maybe not practical, given that some people will decline the vaccine. And how do we move forward then?
We got to figure out, do your classes.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Do I have any other community comments? Okay, going once. Other members can just peek and see if there are other people with their screens on who might be waving at us. All right, going twice. Okay. At this time, the community comment section of our meeting has concluded. We are going to shift now into school committee deliberation and discussion. And I'm going to moderate that discussion. So I'm just going to ask before we begin that I do have one thing to read on behalf of Ann Hovey, who was not here tonight. And then I will take members' comments and we'll go back and forth as we need to. And, I'm sitting in a comfortable chair, so we can be here.
Maggie, can I ask a quick question, Maggie?
Sure, Andrew.
So do you want me to respond to these questions, not in full, because there's no way I can get to every single thing that was said, but to some of these things are logistical things that I could answer pretty quickly?
Absolutely. Were you taking notes as we went along as well?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So yeah, why don't you feel free to respond to whatever you've heard so far tonight, and then we can go from there.
Okay. So we have talked about traffic being a challenge, and we know that it may be a challenge because people feel safer driving their kids. It's a challenge under normal circumstances. Although we haven't had any lengthy conversations on it, I can assure you that it's something that the administration will have to try and tackle. We haven't been successful for the past 15, 20 years, at least since my kids were being dropped off at school. It's just an incredibly difficult circle that we deal with because you get 3 lines of cars in front of Linquist, and they stop, they go, they let kids out in various locations. That's a tricky situation, but I do think that we could maybe cone off lanes on that. I also want to say that the state has changed the guidance on buses. And essentially what used to be 1 child per seat has now been made 2 children per seat. So that's double the space on the buses. And obviously today being the exception, spring is on our doorstep. 5 weeks from now, I think it will be safe to say that people will be a lot more comfortable opening the windows for ventilation in the buses. I don't know what this, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but the vaccinations versus not vaccinations and it being a requirement, I take the guidance from the experts in the field. I'm not one, but I do trust our health and hygiene folks who have said that they believe that with our protocols that are in place that we've been doing, they believe that we can do it without the vaccination. Now, I've tried to plan this to dovetail with vaccinations. The vaccinations from my sources are supposed to be coming mid-March for teachers. In other words, moving off of 65s. I don't know if that's a good source who told me that, but if it were true, then we would be talking about 3 weeks after it kicking off. So my prediction is that we would have at least 1 round of vaccinations, and 1 round of vaccinations gives somebody in the range, and again, I'm not the doctor on this, and I don't think our doctors like to comment specifically, but from what I've been reading on it, gives you in the range of a 60 to 80% protection against death or hospitalization after 1 shot. So I feel like if we get that 1 shot, we would be well on our way to protecting ourselves, or 2 weeks after that 1 shot. Workspaces has come up. We are working on, the high school has more workspaces than the middle school because it has department workrooms. Some of the department workrooms at the middle school have been used for classroom spaces. So we know that we would need to split one of our larger classrooms. We think we can do that between now and the time that we would roll this out. That gives us an additional classroom. We also believe that we can convert a big portion of the library, if not all of it, for teacher workspaces or to alleviate pressure and allow for more meeting space. Incidentally, let's not look at this through rose-colored glasses. In the summer, when we were talking about the hybrid model, people were not pleased. There was not support for the hybrid model. People wanted to stay remote. So, and I've heard tonight that people are saying it's a very good thing and it's worked really well. And I agree it's worked well, but we didn't originally, a lot of people didn't think it would. Just a reminder, when you double the students, it doesn't mean you're doubling the risk. Lunch, there's new guidelines coming from the state, supposedly this week around lunch, which could take some pressure off of the lunchrooms. But we have figured out alternative spaces to accommodate our students for lunch. We also know that if you check next week when the weather gets better, the kids will be outside. They love to be outside anyhow. This has only prompted them to be out even more. Finally, I heard something about the fountains, but I wasn't quite sure. I know that we're getting hooked on water bottle refilling stations. I think they're a better option anyhow. And I did hear from some kids on my sustainability task force who said they just weren't sure if they were allowed to drink from their water bottles in class. And that to me is concerning. So I immediately checked with Jill Fedora, our lead nurse, who said, of course they can drink from them. They would have to lift their mask and take a drink, but that's something that is okay to do. We're not using water fountains.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Keogh. I appreciate the clarifications. All right, so to begin our deliberation, with the permission of the committee, I'm just going to read just a short letter that I received this afternoon from Anne. She feels terrible that she was not able to join us tonight. She says, "Dear Maggie, can you please read this aloud at tonight's meeting? Thank you. I apologize for not being able to be with you tonight at this meeting. I'm bringing my daughter home from college 2 weeks before the end of the term because her college is and will continue to be in total lockdown. At her school, students are tested twice a week, and there had been no cases since the first week of term. So some students were tired of all the mask wearing and social distancing that kept them from having the experience they felt they deserved, decided to have small parties. The resulting spike in cases was so significant that the college has now turned to total lockdown. And anecdotally, 9 faculty have tested positive or have symptoms. I'm sure they weren't attending the parties, that their socially distanced interactions with the students were masked. So unfortunately, I'm not able to be with you tonight. I do have some thoughts that I wanted to share. I believe that we all want students back in school. Everyone agrees that that's the goal. So I think our time tonight should be used to discuss how to get them back in school in a way that allows all to feel safe physically and emotionally so that they're able to do their best work. If opening schools is a priority, then making it as safe as possible for students, teachers, and administrators, support staff, and custodians must be everyone's priority, both in and out of school. I sincerely believe we can be successful if we work together, listen, and empathize. This has been a year filled with personal loss. In addition to our own adult losses, we deeply feel our children's losses as well. Some adults and children are experiencing depression and anxiety. Most are exhausted and our emotions are raw. Teachers, administrators, parents, students, and school committee members and other staff, this year has been incredibly hard on everyone. So as we work together to figure out how to best get our older students into school more, please take a deep breath, grant each other some grace, and remember that we share the same goal. I'd like to open it up for school committee comments or questions. I do see that we have a number of members of our Board of Health on tonight, so perhaps they'll be available if we have specific questions for them. Michael Jaffe and then Kate Potter.
Thanks, Maggie, and apologies in advance. I'm going to be a bit long-winded. I don't actually, on this call or meeting, I'm not requesting answers to questions, but I would like to have further dialogue or further dialogue occur relative to a number or all of my questions. There are a lot of complicated, nuanced, and thoughtful considerations associated with an expanded reopening of our middle school and high school. So to maintain clarity of my own thought in the complex backdrop, I chose to prepare some remarks in advance that I wanted to share with fellow school committee members tonight. Up until the past 3 weeks or so, I was under the impression that planning for additional days in person was well underway as an inclusive process with interactive consultation and input from representative teachers, parents, and school committee members, kind of like a scaled down version of the summer reopening activities. I thought at a minimum, teachers, parents, and students would be surveyed, and there would be a number of interactive forums for the sharing of ideas, concerns, and scenarios prior to a concrete declaration of the proposed 4-day plan. I was wrong, and I apologize to our community for not being more proactive in requesting detailed status updates. My misimpressions became apparent when, without prior notice as to substance, the 4-day plan was announced several weeks ago at our February 9th joint school committee meeting. Prior to this announcement, the regional school committee has been consistently told that increasing middle school or high school days in school prior to the end of the year would just simply not be feasible. So having not been informed about the change perspective and proposed plan prior to our meeting, I was taken completely by surprise and not prepared for a robust discussion when announced at the February 9th meeting. Both during the meeting, by way of texts and emails, and since, I've received many communications from teachers and parents and heard from a number of high school students expressing deep concerns with the 4-day plan. I may not have a fulsome picture of the planning inclusiveness, so I'm open to correction of correction of any impressions I formed based on incomplete or incorrect information. I was intending tonight to share the content of just one of the many emails I've received on this topic to convey a sense of both the level of concerns out there and the thoughtfulness in thought process, all the while keeping student and staff well-being at the center. I will share part of that of one email. I've admitted most points that were made by other teachers tonight, but I'll read the email just to get a little bit of a flavor. I'm writing to you to relay many concerns about the proposed reopening plan. I spent considerable time talking to colleagues, listening to real personal challenges, and staying on top of news related to COVID spread and vaccinations. I write with urgency, deep worry, and respect. I'm going to eliminate a lot of the substance. Switching to a 4-day in-person model would be incredibly disruptive to the current model from a pedagogical, personal, and health standpoints. A crowded high school would change how teachers are able to provide instruction. For me personally, I would discontinue the hands-on component of my science courses. Hallways would be crowded, and snack time and lunch would be hurried and less safe. Many teachers work with more than 100 students each week, and doubling the contact time while having twice the students crowded into the building for 4 days a week would have a dramatic impact on both safety and the ability to follow mandated distance protocols. At the end of last summer, the morale among teachers at the high school was at a tremendous low. Their legitimate concerns about a hybrid model were aired, and many people took valiant stances to show support for those most vulnerable. And that led to a modified model that allowed for more safety, childcare flexibility, and an opportunity for better instruction. Morale changed because voices were heard, acknowledged, amplified, and used to frame a solution that felt like a compromise of many important considerations. It's time to do that again. For many months, I felt morale grow in the school community, but last week, everything changed again, and the morale is at a new low. Decisions proposed seem arbitrary and without any real dialogue, without listening, without careful consideration of potential consequences, which should not be guessed at, but rather assessed through a patient conversation. It's time to pause, reflect, communicate, and reconsider. So that's the end of that particular teacher email. There were a lot of emails received from teachers, from parents, and I'm very appreciative of all of the perspectives that were shared. Based on the listening that I've done, my concerns are both procedural and substantive. From a procedural standpoint, I'm deeply concerned that the process has not given ample voice to stakeholders in a collaborative manner to yield an appropriate plan. In a bit more detail, the process concerns include the following. Staff seem like they've not been solicited for concerns, input, and ideas. More than one stated that they feel like this is a top-down decision from central office without any collaborative inclusion. And the impression I've gotten is that there's a broad lack of support from the staff, not just the teachers. And there's also a feeling that the staff voice is not important. Several stakeholders cited a lack of comportment to DS core values in the process. One concern about a non-inclusive process is that we'll be left with deep resentment and morale issues that will take a long, long time to overcome. Their parents, who are more concerned with safety issues than some others may be, feel that there hasn't been a forum for a reciprocal dialogue and not simply pre-submitted question and answer that can help inform planning. Requests to survey staff, parents, and students for perspectives on key details were initially rejected. I was glad to see the surveys went out in the past few days. That said, I'll note that the survey mandate for staff and parents to self-identify rather than optionally self-identify likely materially skews the results to be consistent with the party line. Accordingly, I question the value of this data and would request that avenues are opened for meaningful interactive commentary and dialogue. At our February 9th joint school committee meeting, I requested a school committee briefing of reopening logistics, which has not occurred. I remain interested in hearing the specific details of reopening. On the substantive side, my concerns include the following. My biggest concern is further marginalization of fully remote students and a potentially larger cohort of fully remote students, creating a larger number of marginalized remote students. My understanding from Kate McCarthy's mental health assessment rollout is that DS students have fared reasonably well. Given the continued safety protocols, is it reasonable to expect that any overall positive pickup in student mental health and learning experience from 4 days will outweigh any mental health and learning detriments to those remote students? I have pedagogical and teaching and learning concerns. I wonder whether busing density and junior senior privilege will actually increase rather than further mitigate infection risk. Emerging more contagious COVID variants in the US are projected to geometrically increase based on what Europe is currently experiencing. I just read a couple of hours ago that Italy is having a horrible experience with their student population with the British variant. And I also further understand that we're maybe 2 to 3 weeks behind the impact of that variant in the United States. I will note that the past 7 days at Dover-Sherborn has seen the highest number of reported infections with a 7-day period since the beginning of the pandemic. It represents 13% of our cumulative cases reporting since the pandemic's onset, and the number of cases at Chickering, where they are in school 4 days, in this same time frame, last 7 days, is double the next highest 7-day period of infections at Chickering and represents 44% of the cumulative cases reported at Chickering since the onset of the pandemic. I'm concerned about the seeming cherry picking of safety protocols from CDC by DESE, DPH, and boards of health. My read of the CDC guidance is that vaccinations are not mandatory conditions precedent to expand reopening, but strict adherence to protocols, including minimum 6-foot distancing, are. I know that DPH, DESE, and Board of Health have dispensed with the strict distancing requirements on buses and in schools in contradiction of CDC guidelines, which I don't understand, and it seems problematic to me. Additionally, the CDC is urging teachers to be prioritized to priority 1B nationwide has fallen on deaf ears at the Massachusetts state level. Concerned about the timing of the reopening regarding or relative to the anticipated vacation surge, AP exams, MCAS, vaccine rollout, school density, and teacher daycare planning. Will teachers who are on the fence about returning in September due to their own family health risks elect to take leave for the remainder of the year, leaving us with a large void that is likely not possible to fill given the dearth of long-term substitutes available? What are the potentially adverse staff mental health impacts by not including staff in a fulsome dialogue? Has the internet bandwidth backbone been test run to ensure that simultaneous zooms out from each classroom will be reliable? So in closing, I very much want students to return to as many days as possible and as prudent, considering all relevant issues. I am grateful for the efforts to date to return students on a 4-day schedule. At the same time, before any change is made, I think it's imperative to have a more fulsome interactive dialogue with key stakeholding groups in order to better identify, manage risk, as well as maintain collaborative working relationships. That's all I have.
Thank you, Michael. Kate? And then Judy.
Thank you. I have a main question about scheduling, and I've asked it before, but I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. And I don't know if people from the Board of Health might help me out here. It's my understanding that grade 6 through 12 will remain on their same schedule. So for example, kids who are with the same teacher in person Monday and Tuesday will be with the same teachers on Thursday and Friday. So we will not be mixing new groups of students in new classes. I understand that passing times and lunch times and the breaks are something that we're working hard on figuring out. And I'm so glad that we're able to have this open discussion, and I respect the teachers immensely. I'm not currently teaching, but I used to teach. I'm just trying to understand the differing level of risk for our teachers with the longer term in classroom exposure. Am I correct that they will be seeing the same students they're seeing now just for 2 more days? We're not adding in new cohorts of students into their classes, correct?
That's correct, Kate. Yeah, it's just that the kids would be in on Thursday and Friday. They'd be following the schedules that they already currently have on Thursday and Friday. So they're seeing their same teachers. Am I missing something on that, John or Scott?
That is correct. Same schedule for the high school.
Right.
Same for the middle school.
Thanks. Did you have other questions at this point, Kate?
Not right now.
Okay. I guess I want to piggyback a little bit on Kate's question. So at the high school, for students who have DRs, what will they then be reporting to a study? Will there be any flexibility given? You know, I know we have privilege here and there, and will that change like the day for those educators on the days that they're in person?
So if I may, Maggie, so for the high school for directed research, we'll still have DRs in place, and they'll still be supervised by a teacher. Because of the structure of the DR, we use that as time on learning, so we would have to maintain that. The only consideration that we are asking for the superintendent and the regional school committee is consideration of allowing juniors to sign out during the lunch block, because the lunch block is one of our more dense times. And if some juniors' families are comfortable with that, it would be 45 minutes. That would help us. And we think that that would actually alleviate a lot of fears of a lot of people with density issues. And then, but the DRs themselves will not change.
And regarding lunch, are students allowed to elect to eat out lunch outside on any day, or only when the weather's nice, middle school and high school?
At the high school, anytime. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
you know, we don't encourage them like on a day like today. No students are outside for obvious reasons. That's not healthy, but they have the access to be outside any other time that they would like, where the temperatures are reasonable and they wish to do so.
Okay.
Same with the middle school, but with the caveat that we did have a few individuals that chose to eat outside today, which I question their judgment, but
listen,
they got
taking
fresh
off my
air.
school committee chair hat and putting on my middle school assistant principal hat, I had 5 lunches go out for 10-minute recesses. And if you wear a warm coat and a hat, you can be plenty safe outside on an 18-degree day. Just putting it out there.
Well,
But
here's hoping there's no more 18-degree days.
please, it was cold. I'll say cold. All right. Other school committee member comments, questions? Judy, sorry, I lost track there for a minute.
Hey, it's okay. I first want to say that I completely understand the mental health issue for our students and for our teachers. I have been for the last year practicing law out of my house, and I'm losing my mind. And so if anyone thinks that people really want to work or learn remotely, I would be surprised. to learn that people would choose that over the ability to work communally. And that's the mental health of our students, particularly our high school students, is wildly important to me. And it was the reason I supported the hybrid model last summer. And I continue to appreciate that very much. I also want to thank Dr. Keough for pushing back the time for the middle school to transition from March 22nd to April 5th. I think that was a wise decision because it gives everybody a little bit more time. And it's also going to be a lot warmer on April 5th, hopefully, than March 22nd, which will help with the lunch and all of that. And so I really, really appreciate that. I want to say that the problem I'm having is twofold. And the first is I think it's important for all of the educators to have the opportunity to have at least one shot of the vaccine prior to returning for 4 days, because I think that's going to give us a better shot at making it work for our students. Because as we said last summer, teachers missing school has a huge impact on the teachers, but an even huger impact on the students, and our ability to get subs is going to be a problem. And Andrew, this is not your fault. This is the fault of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I am pretty enraged that our governor had changed the priorities and pushed our educators back down on the list. And if anybody knows the governor and wants to give him a call, I'd be happy to let him know my views on it. And so I really want to say the governor has put you, Dr. Keough, in a bind, and all of us. Having said that, I agree with Michael that I wish this had been a more collaborative process. And I still have concerns about how you're going to fit all these kids in at a 5.5-foot distance. And more importantly, how's everybody going to feel like they've been heard with regard to their issues? So I guess my question is, I don't want to look backward. I want to look forward. And so again, I really appreciate that we've got 5 weeks now for this plan. And so I guess my real question is, how are we going to accomplish this and get a majority of people to well, let me stop. I'm going to ask that question, but I also want to say one thing I'd like you to consider. You know, the Biden administration said today that they want to try to make sure that all the teachers get their first vaccine by the end of March. And I think that that's fantastic. And I would suggest that if Massachusetts continues to screw up the way they've screwed up this far, and we don't get that, we think about, do we want to reconsider? I'm just saying, you know, we should be flexible in terms of that. But I think that we're actually going to get there and get that vaccine. But my question is, I was hoping to hear more details about.
Judy, you just muted.
My question, and I'm sorry it's so long-winded, is what are we going to do in the next 5 weeks to make sure that people feel heard and that we get the issues ironed out in a more collaborative way? Is that possible? And what's the plan for that?
So I'm gonna assume there isn't a plan already, but I feel like that might, I don't know. I don't know if is that a question?
Actually, Maggie, there
Okay.
is.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so we've already held meetings with our faculty at the middle school and the high school and at the elementary level to hear teachers' concerns. What we know is that and you're learning this tonight, that having a discussion with 100 people is not so easy to do. So in order to move that along, we asked people to jot down their questions. And with Ann Keegan's help, at the high school, and I don't know how they gathered the information, Scott could probably tell us, or Anna, but at the high school, I know they used Jamboards and people put their post-it notes all together, and we took that information, and some of those questions were redundant. So we, where there was redundancy, we actually bolded those questions. And then when we met with the teachers, we hit as many of the bold questions as we could, and we asked our health and hygiene folks. Kay was there, Alexi Boudreau was there, and Matt were there, and Jill. We asked them to respond to the big questions. And then I wrote separately responses with support from the leaders who were responsible for those particular areas, responses to the questions we didn't get to. So we've already held those 2 meetings. I don't agree with what's been said about that. Secondly, we have follow-up meetings tomorrow that are unscripted. People can come and say whatever it is they want to say. So those opportunities are there. I'm told that at the high school, there was not interest. I haven't been involved in that conversation. I've gotten that through another source, and it wasn't because people were being disrespectful. I just heard, at least my understanding was that they didn't feel the need, but the offer is and was there. So if folks want to come, Beth, what time are those 2 meetings?
The middle school faculty is tomorrow morning at 7:45. The high school faculty, we haven't yet scheduled yet.
Okay. And then we also have meetings with the parents.
Yes, we have secondary parents. I'd have to look. I'm drawing a blank.
I think it's important to note that that's a really unfair assumption or statement for anyone to suggest that we haven't been thoughtful in these procedures. We've been listening to people and communicating with people throughout this process. I can't tell you how many letters of appreciation I get. So we do, we're not perfect by any stretch, but we've done a good job with the system as a whole, and we do care what people have to say. But at the end of the day, as the regional committee, you've given me the authority to make decisions on this. Has it been perfect? No, and that's why I said it in my presentation. But if you feel strongly that it should go a different way, then as a school committee, you're going to have to change it, because I feel strongly that this is the way to go.
I absolutely hear you on that. I have Kate and then Michael.
Just a quick question. Am I correct that there is a parent Zoom along with the Board of Health tomorrow night at 6:30?
Yes, Kate, that was the date. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And by the way, thanks very much. Thanks to our Board of Health people who are doing that. They're going to come, and then I think the meeting's at 6. Is it not, Beth? And then they're going to, or is it 6:30 and then they're going to a Board of Health meeting at 7?
Right. So they're going to speak first. Yes, at 6:30.
So they're coming on for a half hour. So they've been doing a lot of that for us, and we owe them. We will owe them eternally, because they've just made themselves available, including tonight, and I didn't even think to invite them tonight. So they're, and a few are here.
Thanks, Andrew. I see Dr. Peterson's right there in my front and center, and maybe some other folks there. So thank you very much for spending yet another evening with us. Michael.
Yeah, Andrew, we'll agree to disagree. I do want to very strongly point out that subsequent to the meeting with teachers, we heard from many teachers about not being heard. The having a Zoom meeting that's 45 minutes with 8 to 10 minutes at the end where I believe one, perhaps two teachers were able to ask questions. I believe it was maybe just one. That is not an interactive and iterative dialogue. I would like to either move or have at least a polling of our regional school committee members, that if that's going to be the extent of the inclusive dialogue, that we do rescind the delegation and take a more active oversight role.
All right. I mean, I think I just heard Andrew say that they're having another session tomorrow that is open and that there's one on offer at the high school. I mean, I'm like, for me, I'm not ready to do that at this point, but Kate, I see a shaking head. I can't see Lynn for some reason. You've kind of fallen off my thing, so you might have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry.
I'm at the top center of my screen.
Okay, sorry. Back anyway. Judy?
Yeah, Andrew, I wasn't asking you about collaboration necessarily with regard to, and it's my fault because I don't think I was articulating this well, with regard to talking to the teachers about their concerns. What I was talking about in terms of collaboration was, last summer, I think that the district did a phenomenal job at planning for the hybrid model. All the committees and everything that was done last summer. And I was hoping tonight to hear about all of what we've done. The questions I had were more along the lines of, what are we going to do about the classes that are being taught in the science wing that can't be there anymore because now there's going to be, science classes taught, and what are we doing about the interior classrooms, and what are we doing about lunch, and sort of the collaborative process of planning for how we're going to go to 4 days was what I was hoping that you were going to use the next 5 weeks to sort of nail down and do. And so I wasn't, those are the issues that are important in terms of people's safety to me.
No, I appreciate that, Judy. I was actually responding more to what Michael had said, but the difference between right now and last summer is we're in the middle of a school year. So, our teachers are teaching and they're in 2 days, not 4 or 5. Our administrators are consumed. There's all of the other work that's been going on within the district of the building the budget and all of the countless meetings that go into that. So what we've done is we've just transitioned, and I think the leaders, the members of the leadership team would tell you, we've just simply transitioned and are using the leaders as our mouthpiece and earpiece. They're the ones who are on the ground within their buildings. In the summer, we didn't have that. So we actually paid people to participate in conversations. Right now, our teachers meet with their administrators on a regular basis. They meet with their departments on a regular basis, and that's how we expect information to make its way up to us. But I think we've gone above and beyond, if you look at this whole thing, in our efforts to hear people. But there's a big difference, folks, between hearing what people have to say and agreeing with what people have to say. And sometimes when you don't agree with what people have to say, they don't think you're listening. We all know this because most of us have had children. And my children would say, "You never listen to me." And I would say, "Well, it's not that I'm not listening, I just don't agree with you." And sometimes that's the case. And I think in a case like this, where you have a divisive issue, we've been through things like this before, like the start times. When you have a divisive issue, one side may be 60 to 40 or 65 to 35, but one side's going to be a little stronger voice than the other, but that other voice is going to be super strong, and they're going to be offended if you don't listen to them. This is not a new development for school systems. And I think what I would say is that we really do care what the people have to say, and we have been listening. And And quite honestly, sometimes it's pretty hard to listen because it's not always very nice, but just the same, we're trying. We are listening.
Okay,
But
so
wait, but that doesn't answer the question of, like, have you worked out all those issues and of the classrooms and that kind of thing? Did I miss something?
Right. So no, you didn't miss anything at all. I just, as I said before, I didn't put that slide in because I just didn't want to go on and on all night. But if you want to, I mean, I don't know any other way to go through logistics, every single one of the logistics that we have talked about or tried to address. For example, I mean, I'll just go briefly down the list. Buying desks so that we have enough desks, making sure that we have the HEPA filtration systems, making sure that we have seating in the cafeteria to expand our seating during lunches, making sure that we can adjust our lunch periods so that we can accommodate more kids because there'd be more kids in the building. The list just goes on and on and on. And I don't think I can go through, the literally hundreds of logistical questions in a group like this. It's just not really practical. So I chose not to do that for that very purpose, but I'm happy to answer those logistical questions. And I've said that to Maggie, and I've been getting questions from the school committee members along the way, and have done my best to answer those. And I've done that with teachers as well.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Kinda, yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I want to think about it, and maybe I'll send those questions. I'm just trying to make sure that when we do this, because we will be doing this, we do it really well, and we've done so up to this point, and I hope that we continue in that vein.
We have, Judy, and I agree, and I keep on hearing how well we've done and how well the hybrid model has gone. But let's remember, it didn't feel that way when we were starting. I remember receiving a letter from the association, which you guys were on, saying they did not want to go in a hybrid model. They wanted to go stay remote. So it's not like it was fully embraced. People did not want to do it. Let's remember that. I think we're being revisionist in our memories.
All right.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I really want to keep this conversation focused on between now and the end of June, and then whatever we're talking about afterwards. Just because, like, we have all, like, I just need to keep it focused on that. Lynn.
So I have several thoughts that are all just going to come out all over the place, but one thing that's very important to me that it be clear is that certainly I haven't interpreted any of the school committee's members' comments or any of the educators' comments, either in the survey or tonight, as being resistant to the plan itself. It's the fact that we want or need information and answers to questions. It's not like, I feel like a lot of the conversation is sounding like, or reactions to it are sounding like we're being resistant, saying if the school committee wants to go a different direction, feel free. I don't get the sense that any of us feel that way. It's that we have questions that ideally could have been answered before the presentation to us of the plan on the 9th. And, to that end, asking questions, we're not trying to be resistant. It's just information would be beneficial. And towards that end, we're not interested in the detail of, how are the desks going to be arranged. If we can be told in connection with the presentation, we have collaborated with the people who have these questions and we've sorted them out, and here is our presentation, and here is, bottom line, we are able to comply with the or maintain the social distancing protocols that we had in place before. Or here is, the consequences of the following changes that we're making. They're not going to change our risk level going forward. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know the bottom line details, but when we're given a presentation of a plan and then a flood of feedback saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? It raises questions. And, but I mean, I guess my point is, this is, unfortunately, it's sounding contentious because it's literally, we just need the information in connection with the plan itself. And yeah. And so, for instance, like one of my questions is, what's the rationale for, I know the date has changed, but the date is still before vacation. So for example, why are what are the factors that went into deciding that date over after vacation?
Oh, I mean, my feeling is that there are multiple stakeholders here, right? But ultimately, the parents and the teachers, students should have the equal say, but they don't necessarily engage the same way. So it ends up being the parents and the teachers in this particular case, and obviously the school committee. But I feel a great deal of pressure. I'm surprised that you're not feeling the same pressure that I am if you're not on the school committee level, because I'm feeling a tremendous amount of pressure from families. Just in sheer numbers of people who participated in the survey alone was close to 600 people weighed in on that. So that's a lot of feedback. And the feedback was, you saw the charts, the feedback was overwhelmingly that they'd like us to come back. So I'm feeling pressure to get the kids back in as soon as possible. That's where that comes from. And it's not, and as far as like the logistics, do you guys need to know the details about how many desks we need and stuff like that? I don't get into those details with you guys, or HEPA filters. And so that's why I pulled it out of the slide presentation, because I didn't really feel like the school committee was going to be that interested in it, because I would assume that you would leave that to me as kind of the point person.
That's what I was saying.
I can tell you the administration has worked its tail off from the start of this thing and continues to relentlessly, even in the face of a lot of criticism. But we keep at it.
That's literally what I was saying, is that we shouldn't, and at least for me, we don't need to be in that level of detail, but if we're not given, at least is in connection with the presentation, if we're not given the information that all of these things have been sorted out and the right people have been in the room to figure it out, and that we've dealt with the social distancing protocols, period.
So if I told you that, Lynn, if I told the school committees that we're addressing those issues, would that satisfy all of you? Because I'll tell you right now, we are.
Yeah, I think that's an oversimplification of what I'm trying to say, which is, bottom line, Michael said it better. I think if we had the collaboration ahead of the presentation, I think the presentation would reflect the concerns of the school community, and we'd be less in a position now of scrambling to have questions answered after the fact. But I agree with Judy. I want to move forward. We need to look forward. And my only reason for that comment was to make it clear to the 7 pages of people that are listening to us that we are not resisting this plan. We are just trying to get information, and that's the reason for our questioning, and it's the reason for this meeting tonight. It's not because the school committee wants to go in a different direction. second guesses your judgment. It's just, we have a job to do and we need information.
Thank you, Lynn. I actually have some questions that maybe people on this call, I don't know if Dr. Peterson's still here or not, but maybe.
I know that, excuse me, Maggie, I know Alexi Boudreau, Dr. Boudreau is here.
Okay.
And
My questions are going to be specific around like contact tracing and stuff. So whoever, I know Mrs. Fedora is here as well. So whoever would be the right person that might be able to answer them.
Contact tracing would probably be best handled by Jill. Just by the way, I do need to clarify.
Great, thank you.
I do need to clarify that, just to be clear, it was in my meetings with Health and Hygiene originally, when they were saying to me they thought we could return based on everything they knew, and these are the people we've trusted throughout this process, that we could return in early March. I have tried to work with all the constituent groups to satisfy them. And that's why I bumped out to the 22nd and to the 5th. It's not an easy position to be in, but I just wanted to mention that. So did you want to hear from Jill about contact tracing? You had a question?
No, I have some like specific, I have like kind of, I've been sort of holding on to questions. And so as I go through, like, I'm just hoping maybe whoever's there that like might know more, like whatever. Let me just ask the question. All right, so I have some worries about our remote students. And while I have like all due respect for our remote families that have opted to be remote so that they could be in nicer locations, like warmer locations, and I totally respect that, and maybe I'm jealous a little, but I'm mostly worried about our families who are remote because they have family members who have like pretty major health concerns. And so, I was listening to the conversation tonight, and I'm wondering, is there anything that we can do, even on a temporary basis for the rest of this year, to support particularly students, like particularly those classes where students are there? I'm like, I don't know these details, but like you guys probably do, that there's some people who are there because they can't go to school because it's not safe for them. And particularly for those families, is there a way that we could provide support in classrooms where like another human being, not the teacher, is with the Zoom, so that the children in that classroom have more support to like, because I mean, I do a lot of teaching. So like I'm paying attention to us, but I'm also paying attention to like the 15, 20, 22 kids or whatever in my classroom. And I'm just wondering, like, is that something that say, on a very zero cost basis, that either a high school student in a DR, and I guess we count that as time on learning, so it wouldn't count if they went to like use their DR to go to a different class, but then they'd learn other things. But like either a volunteer thing, or is there a way we could have just like a stipended position? Like I think about our colleague, Mrs. Hovey, and her daughter seems like she's gonna be home for a while. Do we have some college students who are home that we could just pay them like per class to say audit, world history, and what their job is just to man the iPad and then make sure that those kids have a fighting chance of being part of the community? Or am I thinking so wildly out of the box that that's absolutely not possible? So you don't have to answer that right now.
Oh, okay, because I know Beth was going to take a run at that.
Beth,
She has a
right.
lot of ideas about that. And this has been something that's a hot topic, obviously, because it's been hard for the teachers in any
it's a hot
circumstances.
topic. Yeah, because I know it's actually really hard for the teachers, but I also know, just practically speaking, the live person is going to trump the Zoom person, and so like there's just no way around that. So yeah, Beth, what are you thinking about?
So I appreciate the creative thinking around using seniors or folks that are home in classrooms, and Andrew and I would need to do some processing with the school leaders around the feasibility of that with all the protocols in place, but I appreciate the creative thinking, so keep it coming. But in terms of where we are right now, we had shared with you all the survey data that went out to students and families and educators. We had also sent out a survey specifically to the families of remote students, asking for what's going well and how can we better support. So we have an ongoing list. For example, things that they said really help them do, thrive at home are things like Pear Deck that allow the students to go along with the teacher throughout the activities, breakout rooms, when lessons are recorded in a flipped classroom model. I know that there are some concerns around flipped classroom in math, but the overall feeling around the flipped classroom model is really positive, especially for the remote kids. Help sessions, the remote families really, really appreciate those. The guidance check-ins, the weekly learning plans, all of those need to continue, and we need to reinforce that those be used across the board. What they're asking for so far has been help with the sound. We understand that it's often hard to hear the teacher and the students when they're in class. So just this week, Anthony Ritaco in the IT department has been researching different options. I know the World Language department already has 360 mics in their classroom because so much of their class is dialogue in a different language. So he's looking to replicate that in other classrooms and is coming up with proposals for that. Discussions, I don't remember what that note means, but there's also research coming out about what practices are working, because now we're a year into this and we used to say, well, how do we know what's working and what's working? And there is research now saying what does work. And even just recently, Caitlin Tucker had an article in Edutopia about how to juggle the two and how to kind of break your class into stations. So you have the kids who are remote as one station, and then your in-person learning students as another station, and how you can juggle between them based on, giving everybody a warm up, checking into the kids, and kind of going back and forth that way. So I think there's ways we can improve our practice. Is it going to be ideal? Unfortunately not. I do feel for these kids, but I do think that we can learn based on what we've done in the last year and tighten things up a little bit. And again, any other creative thinking or suggestions are welcome.
Thanks. I just really want to keep, we talk about equity and we talk about DS is for everybody. And I feel like I get it. Like 80% of the kids or 90% of the kids are winning, but the ones who are losing feel like right now to me, they're losing pretty big. And that doesn't feel like we are DS. That feels like those of us who can are running to the finish line. But that's just me. It's like feeling kind of yucky. My question that has to do with contact tracing, and it might apply if this, whatever we alluded to earlier in the meeting, talks about like they're going to reinvent what's safe for lunch. I'm a little nervous about everything that's coming out of DESE right now, because I feel like all the things people told us were important, they seem to be disappearing with the end goal of making sure like human children are sitting in classes at all costs. So I guess my question will also apply if like the guidance coming out of lunch is that less than 6 feet is okay. When we are talking about putting 2 people on a bus seat together, does that mean that if like my kid's on a bus and they've got their friend sitting next to them and then another person in front of them and a person behind them, and the bus ride is a half an hour, are all those people now, when we contact trace, close contacts and quarantined?
Can I jump in? Hi, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be great, Jill. Thank you. Just introduce so people know who you are, Jill.
Sorry, I don't have my camera on because I was doing something different, which might have included mopping my kitchen floor. I'm Jill Fedor, and I'm the nurse leader for the district and the nurse at Pine Hill. And so I can speak a little bit about contact tracing. And so I guess the general thing that I want to say is, even though we're talking about phasing in more children into the buildings, none of the guidelines are changing, right? So we're still following all of the guidelines that CDC and DESE and DPH have set forth. So we're not changing anything other than adding more students. So we're keeping the same safety measures in place, which in the contact tracing guidelines haven't changed. So yes, we might have, because the transportation guidelines have loosened a little bit, the contact tracing will still be the people in 6 feet of the positive case that is riding the bus. So in other words, it's still going to be the person in front, the person in back, and potentially the person across the aisle, depending on if the positive person was sitting on the aisle or the window. And so I don't know if that answers your question,
Well,
Maggie,
I mean,
but
like, just like for a hypothetical. So my kid is sitting in sections in seat 7. Well, now we have 2 kids next to each other on the bus, right?
so I don't know what other towns are doing, but I can tell you what DS is doing. Siblings are sitting next to each other when there's a sibling.
But
So
not just unrelated people.
it could potentially be an unrelated person.
Okay. So unrelated people. So my daughter is on seat 7B. She's on the aisle seat of row 7. She's sitting next to her neighbor who's 7A. And in front of them is 6A and 6B. And then across from them is 7C and 7D. And behind them is 8A and 8D. So is it possible that my child who gets sick with COVID could take down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people just from a bus ride?
I guess if they are all within 6 feet of your child who's positive, then yes, because that hasn't changed.
Okay.
I would add the time dimension to it, Jill.
Right.
Right, because the bus rides, like, we don't live close to each other, so the bus rides are always at least 15 minutes, right, Alexi, or no?
So I'm not going to come out into the bus rides because I don't know all the routes. But what I can comment is that if the exposure is for 15 minutes or longer, then it's considered contact tracing. If it's shorter,
yeah.
Right?
So all our buses, like when they leave school, it's rare that the kid would be on the bus for less than 15 minutes, because then they would just like, they don't live like, I don't know. Anyway, some kids might. All right, so I just need to understand about that. And if they move eating to be closer than 6 feet, then you'd have your eater and whoever was eating near them, because lunch is 25 minutes, would go down if a kid got COVID, right? Jill or Alexi?
Again, I'm sorry, I jumped on late. Have they changed the guidelines to
No, but it
being
was
closer
alluded to in
together?
the conversation earlier tonight that we might be expecting DESE to change the lunchtime guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much speculation, Maggie. I've only heard that there's going to be new guidance related to lunchrooms. That's all I've heard.
Okay. Well,
I'm assuming that it's a reduction in what we have now. It could be any number of different things. It's pretty stringent guidelines right now. But, you know, as we know, there's been changes in the state in terms of
no, I
eating,
totally get it. But what I'm trying to get at, Andrew, is not like when the guidance from the state changes, at this point, I'm fearing that the guidance isn't around, we know it's safe now to put kids on the bus all next to each other. I think the guidance is changing to allow, or to, like, just on a statewide basis, be talking about having, you know, you can't say that you can't come back to school because of buses, or you can't say you can't come back to school because of lunchrooms, which is, I don't want to take a position on that. What I'm trying to figure out for my own self is, we get a COVID case at the middle school or the high school, how many kids are going down with that kid? And I'll get to why I'm asking in a reason. So my fear is we might have non-siblings on the bus. So now you could take down like up to, I think I counted 8 kids on the bus. Plus, if God forbid you sit near different people. Now, like where I work, like you have assigned seats on the bus, so I'm gonna assume you guys do too. So then we're all set. But then you have lunch. So I'm curious if we are assigning seats at lunch or not. And then if they're eating at lunch at less than 6 feet, where it would allow us to put more people in the cafeteria, that would then cause a close contact to happen at lunch. Whereas right now, if you're 6 feet apart, you don't have one. So my reason I'm asking this is not just because I'm like worried about people getting more sick. Obviously, nobody wants anybody to get sick. But I'm worried about the amount of kids who will be close contact traces and have to miss school. So like right now, if you get contact traced, you miss a week of school, and you miss, like, if you're at the high school, and middle school as well, you miss one of your classes being live because they meet twice a week and you miss the whole week, but 2 of them so if everybody's live, then you are in the Zoom for the whole week and missing more classes. I don't even necessarily take a position on that. I just want to make sure families know that that's going to happen, because I think sometimes, like, what we want is to have COVID go away. Like if you, like I got the survey, like, do I want my kid to go to school for 4 days? Yeah, I want COVID to go away. I don't want to have to wear 35 masks every day. Anyway, I go on. So I'm just worried that these new guidelines that we're making that make this easier to do are going to make it so more people have like other infection, like other side effects that we didn't incur. And like, then that worries me because I want more people to take the bus so that we don't have any car accidents or run over people, or people are like lined up for an hour outside of, you know, Farm Street and down Junction Street.
I wouldn't want to give the wrong impression, Maggie. I don't want to give the impression that none of this worries me. All of it worries me. Every single bit of it worries me. But when I put all of that stuff into the funnel and try and synthesize what is the most critical need here, to me, the most critical need is getting the kids back in. That's where I land on this. And I agree. Yeah, maybe there's a chance that there might be more contact tracing. There might be this, that, or the other thing. There might be a lot of things. There might be a variant that hits Dover directly and everybody gets it. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but I personally haven't been able to lead that way in my career. I can't lead from fear. I lead based on all the variables that are in front of me, and I'm not going to. I lead with the kids at the very first and forefront of my thinking, and that's what I'm trying to do on this.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we have been flexible, that some of our staff, when they've had to be quarantined for close contact or have had to be out of school for other illnesses or issues, that we've allowed them to work from home and Zoom into the classroom for that time. Do we anticipate that continuing when we go back 4 days, or will that not continue anymore?
I would think that we'd show the same flexibility. I mean, we love our teachers too. It's perhaps contrary to some folks' belief. We do love our teachers. We try to accommodate our teachers. We worked really hard this year to accommodate our teachers and show flexibility where we could. And that's one of the way I know that Scott and John have shown flexibility with the teachers. If somebody needs to be home for any particular reason, you know, we don't punish them. We try to support them and show flexibility and have them Zoom in if necessary. And we've done that, and I think, and I would argue, without incident. So I don't see that changing at all.
Okay. And what is going to be the policy once we go to 4 days for families that want to or ask? I've gotten a lot of letters from families this year, you know, to say, you know, we want to visit grandma and we really want to quarantine for the week beforehand. So when we're in 4 days, are we encouraging that, discouraging that? Where are we at on that policy?
I'm not sure I totally understand it, but if I understand you correctly, you're wondering if people are trying to quarantine before they go visit someone just for safety purposes, do we allow them to?
Yeah, or do we allow them to say, you know, we're gonna stay, you know, for another week or so on vacation, we'd like to Zoom in that week?
I think John or Scott could probably answer that better, and I don't even know if they're still at their computers. Beth, do you know the answer to that?
So it's, from what I understand, on a case-by-case basis, you know, similar to the rationale for not canceling the school the week after vacation, because we don't want to promote bad behavior. We are, you know, recommending that families adhere to travel guidelines, and students should attend school when school's in session. But I know that John and Scott and John just popped up on my screen, have been looking at it a case-by-case basis and been in communication with families and working through that with them.
John, you're not getting dinner now, are you?
No, I'm eating peanut butter pretzels, a late snack.
Okay, that's allowed.
We have always been flexible, you know, to a degree with families, but we've also held to the integrity of we're in school, just like we had pre-COVID with vacations. It was not an excused absence because that's why we're in school. That's what our parents expect, and that's what we maintain. But where there have been, you know, unusual circumstances, sure. we've been flexible. We haven't had an open campus type of situation where people can come and go and travel here and there, because frankly, they shouldn't be doing those things. So we've stuck to the fact that school is important. Parents are telling us school is important. So in return, we're asking that they honor that by attending school when school's in session.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Do we have other comments and concerns or questions from other members of the committee? Michael.
Yeah, John, while you're still on camera between pretzels, relative to the, actually, I'd say both senior and junior privilege, has your team discussed, thought about the realities of what students are? I mean, I've spent a couple of lunch hours in Medfield, and the behaviors of Medfield high school students as well as DS high school students are not what you would expect to see on the high school campus. The kids are riding in cars together, unmasked. They're not walking around in masks. They're sitting not 6 feet apart. So there is certainly, and I see it. So it happens. If I didn't see it, I wouldn't know that it happens, but I see it. Has there been consideration of that increased risk versus the reducing the density, which I think is a really kind of a neat creative solution? I just wonder whether there would be increased risk out of having, the students, more students not supervised during that time.
Yeah, but I mean, this is where the community, we own this. And if the families and the parents and the kids are serious about maintaining the 4 days, then that's a conversation that hopefully they're having with their son and daughter to not be doing those types of things in the car. It does make it difficult when they leave campus that they're not under our complete supervision. I will say we've used the data of our seniors who have in fact signed out all this year and then come back, and we haven't seen any increased spread.
All right. Any other committee members' thoughts and comments?
Maggie, can I just very quickly ask Dr. Boudreau, because I think, I believe that when these regs come out, these go through health and hygiene, and then they weigh in, and generally speaking, have taken even harsher kind of positions, more protective.
So whenever DESI guidelines or sports guidelines are released, we do review them in the Health and Hygiene Committee. We understand or try to keep abreast of all the different changes and moving pieces and think about timing and sequence that they might be applicable for our particular community. So for instance, football has been allowed by the state. It's also considered a higher risk sport. The committee, recognizes that quite clearly. And so our recommendation was, as we move forward, higher risk activities should really have an additional layer of protection, and hence we recommended pool testing as a requirement for participation. And so, Maggie, you're right, guidelines are changing really fast as we get to know how this disease behaves, and that's very upsetting when you're trying to work through it. At the same time, I think there's also a politicization that has happened. And so as public health representatives, we do our best to really look at what the guidance is, think about what's happening in the community and how does it apply to us, as opposed to saying, yes, now everybody can start taking chorus again indoors. Just because that's written, it's sort of, well, how does that apply to everything else that's happening here in our schools? And then we pass on our recommendations.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. All right. I think that what I'm hearing from the committee at this point is a general, do you have your hand up, Lynn, or was it still up from before?
I put it up new.
So sorry. Okay, go.
Oh, no, that's all right. It was sort of a follow-on to what Dr. Boudreau was saying as far as, applying standards to our specific circumstances. And one of the questions I had was, has there been an analysis or a perspective provided on how the risk profile is affected by the plan that would have more students in the building for more days? So
yes.
Yeah.
So we specifically asked to meet with school leadership and administration to talk about their specific mitigation and how they were going to continue to carry out the safe practices that have allowed school to be safe thus far. And we did that for many of the same concerns that have been brought up here.
Okay, and is that information we will obtain so that meeting has happened?
The Health and Hygiene Committee has met with school administration and leadership to understand how they were going to be mitigating some of the concerns that have been brought up here and others.
For
Yes.
all of our sports seasons, anytime we have any kind of questionable situation, we run it through Health and Hygiene, because effectively the Health and Hygiene Committee is our pipeline to the boards of health. We have 2 boards of health. It's too complicated to go to all of the Board of Health meetings that we could possibly be called to. So thankfully, these volunteers, amazing people, just such a gift to us, have been at our beck and call when we have these kinds of questions. So when we had questions about athletics in the winter, Emily Sullivan was given a direct pipeline to them, obviously with input from John as the principal of the high school, and even with me on many of those calls, or at least certainly invited to. They've been awesome. So we've felt really secure in our decisions around athletics, and I would argue that's why we've had a safe experience. We likewise with our lack of transmission. They've given us great guidance.
So I don't know if you were elaborating on my question. I wasn't talking about athletics, but
Sorry, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh.
I missed part of it.
Yeah, it was just about the plan and which is going to result in more kids in the building for more days, and whether there's been an analysis of the risk and a discussion of how to maintain the current risk profile, given that kids will be in class participation, so that the letters now are probably coming home there's going to be more letters saying, so and so is the student has contracted COVID and has had in-class participation. And so has that been sort of analyzed from a risk perspective?
From the administration standpoint or from the health and hygiene standpoint? I know the health and hygiene doctors have heard what my thinking was, and have made it clear to me that they think it's safe to do so. Whether or not they, get behind the computers at night and start swapping all of those specific details, I don't know. But I do know that they have said to me that they're comfortable bringing this proposal to the Board of Health. Not without questions. They've asked questions along the way, and they always do. But I think that we count on them to do the behind-the-scenes analysis. I mean, Matt Vitale, the school committee members have seen Matt's analysis of just infections in town, and we know that they take it pretty seriously, so we rely on them to have those discussions. So I feel as if we do have the blessings of the Health and Hygiene and the Board of Health, knowing that there may be more close contacts or whatever it is.
Lynn, to be specific, have we done math? We have done math around contacts in school and outside, and what that's looked like. And have certainly done. I don't want to say hard math. I have to think of a little bit more with math about how much increased risk is. We are well aware that there will be more close contacts, right? And have brought that up as part of the decision making to go more in time or not spend more in time. And I think the question is, will that change at a future date, given everything we know, or will it remain about the same? And so this is why, as the Health and Hygiene Committee, was very interested in understanding the mitigation plan that the school was putting in around bringing more people into the classrooms, continuing to maintain the distance, and how that's going to be handled during higher risk activities, such as in the cafeteria.
All right. Does that answer your question, Lynn?
It does. I'm curious to know how that played out. It sounds like it's what Dr. Boudreau is saying is that the question was raised, but as far as packaging it in a proposal, I would just like to understand, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but unless it was that the issue was resolved, the mitigation plans are in place, and there's not going to be increased risk, that's the piece of information I am looking for.
I think that I understand from this evening's proceedings that that this entire proposal is being brought to the boards of health this week. Does that sound, am I correct there? Yes, okay, yes.
Perfect, and that's
so I feel like we will have more transparency around that. I don't know the exact time of the Board of Health meeting this week, although probably somebody on this call does. But I think that for anyone who's interested in that, we try and catch it, either to join it or to get the minutes afterwards or however we do it. Sounds like it might be an important thing to do. I am looking at the clock. I want to continue this dialogue. I think it's been a really important conversation. I think that this is really complicated stuff, and I'm grateful that we all have hung in there almost, well, not all 180 of us, but 118 of us have hung in there all night to have this conversation, because it is pretty high stakes. It's high stakes for the kids and for their learning. Just this turn of this conversation has got me a little bit worried about close contacts, because I'm thinking about how most COVID is spread out of school. Like, school is pretty safe, right? And so, how is my child, who's generally, I'm not actually speaking about my own child, but just like a hypothetical child, generally we're being super careful at home. We're doing all these things. My child's not going here, he's not going there. And then he sits in class next to somebody else whose family isn't doing those same things, and becomes a close contact that he wouldn't have been if we were only in school 2 days, and now he's out of school for his last week of his senior year or whatever. Like, my brain is just stewing with all these different things, and obviously this is complicated because every day counts. I'm thinking ahead to MCAS, and I mean, just for a personal issue, I would very much like us to not be taking any days out of school to give MCAS. I would very much like the kids to just be able to go to school with their teachers and classes, but that's not for this night. I feel like there's a lot going on in the next week. I think that my understanding is that Lynn and Kate are going to sit down with the MOU team tomorrow to have some of these conversations. Hopefully they'll be substantive and fruitful, and hopefully build on some of the good thinking we've done tonight. I understand this proposal is moving forward to Board of Health. I think that I can hear from the tenor of the conversation that everyone here cares about kids and thinks that live instruction, generally speaking, is better than Zoom instruction. And it's really a matter of how we get from here to there and to what extent we're able to collaborate and work as a team. That's the most important thing to do. So I guess what I would propose, I don't at this point want to put any huge roadblocks or for myself. I certainly don't want to take the idea of going back to school this spring. And, you know, I understand the target date of April 5th. I get the theory behind it. Off the table, but I guess what I would like to do is possibly reconvene as a regional committee at some point next week so that we are able to understand what happened at those meetings, what happened at MOU, what happened at Board of Health, what questions came up. I see Mr. Smith rubbing his eyes because like you've done enough meetings and this is not fair to any of you. I'm so sorry, but I don't know how else to do it.
Well, Maggie, can I just add one other thing? We do meet weekly with the leadership team to process all of these things as well. So Jill has been sitting in on that really as a volunteer. It's not part of her role as an educator. She's been coming to those meetings. That's where we get all of our questions out to her, and she passes them along to health and hygiene. That's where we do all those nuts and bolts questions. What's the proper protocol? And it's worked very well. So I don't want to give the impression that, you know, somehow we're just slapping this thing together. This is months and months and months. I don't know that there's much more we can tell you.
You're not slapping anything together. Like,
no, I'm just saying, I don't think that there's a heck of a lot more we can tell you.
Well, I think what I will know by next week is I will know how that MOU conversation went. I will understand better what, you know, for instance, like I am curious about what is the degree to which the district is offering folks flexibility when they get their golden ticket to get a vaccine. Are we, you know, saying to these folks, like, you got to go when you go, like, you know, my grandma got her thing, we had to take her right then.
And the answer to that is yes. We've already discussed that as a leadership team, and the answer to that is yes. We would allow people to go. So if it came up in an MOU conversation, we would be amenable to that.
Right. So those kind of questions or whatever is, you know, whatever is going, I mean, obviously we know that there's some big levers, you know, we can't make any promises about the day that vaccines will be available for everybody. And, you know, I have strong feelings about that, but I also, you know, respect the larger body as well. But we do have levers that we can pull and things that we can offer. And I, to the extent that that's a substantive conversation tomorrow, I think that's an important conversation. I think that the conversation at Board of Health is important. You know, I certainly, one thing I did last night was sit down and read every single comment from children, every comment from teachers, every comment from adults that people entered on those surveys. And, you know, I mean, a lot of them cheer us on for doing this work, and it's important. It really is. And there are some very specific concerns for folks who are in a, you know, in a precarious situation with their health. And, you know, I will want to understand, you know, sort of making sure that we're making sure to do this right for everyone. I mean, I would like an update a little bit on traffic. Like, traffic's a legit problem. Like, I know it seems crazy, but like, if you're the one who's a mile out on Junction Street, like, is there anything we could do? Can we have a conversation with the police, something? Can we make the roads one way? I don't know, but traffic's an issue. And I feel like between now and next week, there actually will be some things that might change my thinking there. John.
I just want to comment on the parking piece so to make sure regional school committee members know. So Ann Keegan and I have done traffic duty every single day since the school day started. We'll continue to do it every single day to ensure that kids get out safely, to ensure that parents get to pick up their kids safely coming to the middle school. On Mondays and Tuesdays, Ann Keegan covers the freshman sophomore lot. It's not something we anticipated we'd be doing sometime in our careers, but we're doing it because that's what's the right thing to do to make sure that everybody's safe. The Dover police have actually been incredibly helpful. They're not out there every single day, but they're out there many days. And that's not something that they need to do, but they've been doing it. Has it made some people have to wait a little bit? Maybe, but a mile back up, I would just disagree, just because I've been out there with Ann every single day. And I think we move the buses, we're moving students, and we're moving parents in, and we do it equitably. We get them in, we get them out. And it really is not a long backdrop because I'm typically back into the building by about 3:20. So yes, traffic will increase, but we think that we've also handled it quite well. And then I read some of the information on the data saying that some people would then use the bus if it was 4 days. So I'm not as concerned with that, just because I know I'm on the ground every day doing it.
And like, I didn't even cast shade on your, like you guys do, like you do God's work in that parking lot.
But we're also factoring in that with the juniors and senior drivers coming 4 days, that there will be some siblings actually that will be able to ride with them that normally have to take the bus because the kids are on the opposite. So we've thought of every scenario and already working on consolidating the buses to make sure for the riders that we currently have, we have space for. So there's just been a ton of work going into this, but we do think some things are going to fall into place and not be as big of an issue as we think, because of some of these other mitigating circumstances that are going to happen.
Okay.
And could I just throw one thing, because we've done so much work too on lunchroom and lunchroom space. I don't see us, and I don't see us going away from the 6 feet because we have space to accommodate the 6 feet. So the lunch should not be an issue that we're going to downgrade, because I think we all believe that when you don't have your mask on, I've heard Kay, enough from the Board of Health that that's the most important time that we want the distance. So even if DESE lowers that, I don't see us doing it because we figured out a way to make it work.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I think that's huge because it's the difference between close contact and not. So
exactly.
Yeah. And the days of school missed. All right, I heard Kate, yes.
Yeah, sorry, just procedurally, can Lynn and I report back to the school committee after the meeting tomorrow? Do we have to have that in a public meeting, or in the effort of moving this forward, moving along, can we just report back what we learn?
You can
that could be in a narrative form.
Yeah, you can report back to us in an email as long as we don't respond to it or deliberate about it. Then that, so I mean, I guess in that sense, we can certainly wait until the Board of Health, meets, and you guys meet tomorrow before we set any future meetings. Obviously it doesn't sound, I know Andrew, you had asked me earlier, like, do we object to this plan? I don't know what you heard tonight, but I don't hear that there's an objection to returning to school in the spring. I think there's, worry about the details and concern, and it doesn't come from wanting to micromanage. It comes from caring very deeply about a community and having this be a super high stakes decision that, there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot at stake. So
totally appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think, I've said this before when we've been at a crossroads like this. I do think at some point we're asking you to trust us as a team of educational leaders, pretty experienced group of people. We take our jobs very seriously, and we're asking for your support and belief in us in this. But if we haven't done an effective enough job of convincing you that we've got it under control, then I guess we need to do better.
Well, I don't think this is to cast any aspersions. I don't think the robustness of the conversation that we had tonight as a community, listening to the community members as well as amongst ourselves, is it's not to cast aspersions on leadership, yours, your teams, anything. Everybody's doing a really good job, and it's really hard work. Like, there is nothing about this job except, in my case, about going out for recess on a freezing cold day That's actually fun. You dance, you do jumping jacks and so forth. But a lot of the rest of this job is kind of hard and not that enjoyable. So there's no question in my mind. Everybody is working hard. Everyone cares about kids. We're all just trying to do the best we can. I think this is a good time to move on to the addendum to the high school student handbook, for which there is action required, and it does directly impact when the high school particularly goes back to school. John.
I sent a memo to Dr. Keogh and CC the Regional School Committee, and what my request is for consideration from Dr. Keogh and the Regional School Committee to allow juniors with parent or guardian approval to sign out during the lunch block and then to return just like our seniors do, with the intent of lowering the density, creating more flexibility. We have a plan in place for lunch. Basically, and this is the plan, freshmen and juniors would eat together, sophomores and seniors. If juniors and seniors are able to sign out, you're essentially looking at one class, freshmen, eating first lunch, second lunch, sophomores eating lunch. You actually have a decrease in the overall number of students eating lunch if the Regional School Committee is amenable to this addendum to the handbook from the time we return to in-person 4 days till the end of the school year. So we are asking for your temporary authorization. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for sharing that information with us. Do we have any discussion on the parts of the board members regarding this request? Michael.
Yeah, John, thanks for that. And it's with some trepidation that I'm going to vote yes, and the trepidation is what I expressed earlier. But this is also, I think, an example of, we've had a pretty fulsome explanation. We've had an explanation beforehand of what was coming up, the reasons why, what it's going to mean. And myself, I trust that it's been thought through carefully enough, and the alternatives are thought through carefully, that I'm comfortable placing that trust in leadership.
Thanks, Michael. Any other comments? All right, I'd like to invite a motion to make an addendum to the high school handbook that would, for the period of time when school is in session 4 live days, allow juniors to sign out for lunch for the whole lunch period, and this would expire at the end of this year.
So moved.
Motion made by Judy Miller, second.
Lynn Collins.
Oh, I saw Kate Potter for you. So motion made by Judy Miller, seconded by Kate Potter. Please take yourselves off mute. Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter.
Kate Potter, yes.
Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Mr. Smith, I think that's a creative way to hopefully de-densify the cafeteria. I would ask that when we do that, or at the time when we do that, we remind the children that Mr. Jaffe is having lunch in Medfield and is watching them, and that they need to keep their masks on and behave themselves and make us proud.
Will do. We will remind them of their responsibilities. In addition, I just want to clarify for the Regional School Committee, any junior or senior who does not wish to leave campus by no means has to leave campus. We have adequate lunch spots for them. So if some parents and guardians don't want their junior to do that, their new driver, they just don't want to, that's perfectly fine. For others who do, we'd like the opportunity. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you for, as the more juniors get licenses and whoever else is driving to school, for taking your life in your hands and being in that parking lot every day. We very much appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which tonight is simply the approval of the minutes of our February 23rd and 24th meeting.
So moved.
Fruit Moved by Lynn
Second.
Collins, seconded
Second.
by Judy Miller. Okie dokie. And take yourself off roll call. Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Kate Potter.
Kate Potter, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Tonight, and it's really getting short shrift because I read them in detail and I was so impressed by all the reports. Specifically, you know, Zoomsicle was amazing, as well as, you know, all the amazing things going on at the high school. And I hope that all of these, now just 69 people on this call, will read them in the packet because they're awesome. There's a lot of really good stuff going on at the middle school and high school. And with that, I am going to take a motion to adjourn.
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Okay. Second?
Kate Potter, second.
Kate, thank you. Do I have just unanimous consent to adjourn?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you to our teams for updating us next week on what happens tomorrow. Really appreciate it, Board of Health, and we will see you soon.